Hello and welcome to episode 185 of The Crate and Crowbar. It is the 18th of April 2017. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Tom Francis.
Hello.
Philippa Waugh.
Hello.
And returning guest Tim Wicksteed.
Hello.
Hello, Tim.
Hi.
You are the creator of Big Pharma and presently the creator of Megaquarium.
That's right, yeah.
Your game was mentioned so enthusiastically by Pip on our live show that you were functionally summoned into existence in this room.
I know, thanks for having me. It does probably help that I live like half an hour away from you.
That is, yeah.
Yeah, that probably is useful.
I remember last time I saw you was at Dev Days in Seattle, and you were obviously pretty far along with this game, but you wouldn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
This is very unusual. Like, most of my indie friends just spill everything if I ask them, but you're very principled about this.
I just have like a rule, and I don't know if there's, I've given reasons for this rule quite a few times, and it changes over the course of time. Sometimes it's about like, oh, I don't want to be bored of telling people about it by the time I talk to it. Sometimes
That's a good
it's,
point, actually.
I don't want to bore other people about it. But it's just weird. I just have a rule, and it's kind of nice because then I don't like, if I tell some people and not other people, it just kind of gets confusing.
So what is the stage that you decide to reveal it at?
Pretty much when I get nice UI done. So, just like lots of other kind of one-man indies, I do a lot of Coda UI to start, which is rubbish. And I have to get to a certain point with the kind of core gameplay simulation where it's worth getting if there's nothing there to get the UI done, like it's worth getting done. And then once that's in, it kind of makes the game look all shiny. And then I'm like, okay, I'll announce it and show everybody. Even if the core simulation is still like relatively basic, for some reason, it's all about getting that nice UI. And that's when I'm like, okay, I'm ready.
I think the reason I share everything really early is that I want to kind of gauge people's interest levels in it. And for Heat Signature, I actually had 2 games on the go, and I kind of let people somewhat decide, or at least influence me on which ones seem more exciting. And I would worry about working on something in secret for so long. If you're committed to it, like, presumably you announce it kind of at the point where you're pretty sure you're making this game, right?
Yeah, totally. It's like, it's the final time to back down. So, like, basically I booked Res booth early this year, and then I had to, that was my deadline basically. I had to announce before that. I managed to announce a week before. Looks like some kind of really smooth PR fit stunt, but it's like, it's not. It's like, I had to announce because I'm taking it to a show, you know, it's like I wanted to announce before that, but I just ran out of time. So, yeah, and that's basically, I get a load of people to play it there and then, and it's my final chance to basically, if no one's interested, I can just can the whole thing, or maybe reduce the scope or something like that. But yeah, I totally understand. It's nerve-wracking, working for many months on a game in secret, and you have no idea whether people even find the theme or idea interesting. My family knew, and so that was like a very small focus group, but like completely biased and unuseful.
What has the reaction been like?
I think I'm biased
from people who aren't Pip.
Sure, yeah. I think pretty good, actually. So I can only really base it compared to Big Pharma, but Big Pharma, for me, did like really, really well. And so the reaction has, I think, been as good.
Cool.
So that's just based on Res and, you know, people commenting on video blogs and that sort of thing. And, so I think there is an interest. You don't know how much, you're operating in like a little bubble. I'm sure you must sympathize with that. Like, if all the people around you are, happen to be people who like that sort of thing or whatever. So, there's always.
Well, I'm okay with that because all the people around me are games journalists. So if they all like it.
Good point,
when they get
actually.
good reviews.
Yeah, but we can't write about your things.
Yeah,
so.
those specific people can't. But if you're representative of all games journalists, I'm all right.
That's a really good point, actually, yeah.
Your compromised friends. So, I guess for the benefit of people who didn't hear Pip explain the game on the live pod, from your perspective, what is Megaquarium? Because I suspect you might even get a different answer from Pip.
Yeah. It is a game about running your own public aquarium. So, it's kind of taking that theme park management genre, like Theme Park and Roller Coaster Tycoon, and more recently Planet Coaster, and giving it a little twist, which is you're not building roller coasters, you're having to build and manage these living attractions, essentially, various types of aquatic life living in tanks. And so the kind of basic kind of control inputs that you have are going to be similar. You're kind of placing things down and you're kind of laying things out for optimal like guest pathing, if you know what I mean, like guest flow, because you want them to get around all your attractions. But then after you've done that kind of placing down part, then the gameplay is really different, because it's suddenly all about managing and keeping these living things alive. And so it's about feeding them and making sure that they don't succumb to diseases, and making sure they don't fight amongst themselves or eat each other, which is something you don't really have to deal with when you have roller coasters.
Although, now that you mention it,
yeah, it could be interesting,
cool game.
Cannibalistic. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it takes this deviation, I guess, from the formula. And yeah, I think there's just so much interesting stuff there, because there's such a huge variety of fish and, other aquatic life. And it's not just fish. You've got like, you've got your invertebrates, so things like starfish and anemones and corals, and all these things. I'm sure you guys all know, because you're super clever people, but just in case anybody at home didn't realize this, because I didn't realize this before, like corals are animals, like they're alive. They're not like plants. I mean, I know plants are alive too. And
they're not dead like plants.
and it's kind of amazing, because like in a zoo, your animals are they mostly like furry, four-legged things. But under the sea, it's just, it's so much variety. You get these really kind of weird, things, and the way those things can then interact, I think, can be really, really interesting.
So what are the differences between these things from like a game mechanic point of view? Like, is the difference between like a starfish and a bunch of guppies just their stats, or is there something special I have to do?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, these kind of like invertebrates, they mostly eat like plankton, just kind of floating in the water. So it's going to be a slightly different thing. You're not going to have to actively feed them like you would most of your fish. So that's going to have a different sort of mechanic. It's not going to be your staff aren't going to have to go and drop little pellets into the tanks each day. But you are going to have to make sure that there is a good supply of plankton and that sort of stuff. And I need to still do more research, but like I need to work out exactly the sorts of things that lead to that. And then you've got kind of fish that nibble on leaves, on plants and vegetation. So it's important to keep those in there. And then you've got interactions between the fish and the other types of livestock. So like the obvious example is like, because if you've seen Finding Nemo, right? So you got the clownfish, and they like to live in a host anemone. So that just makes them really happy. You don't actually have to put them with a host anemone. They can live without them, but it makes them happy. And so, yeah, you can have all these kind of interesting interactions, hopefully.
So the moment that Big Pharma clicked for me was when I, put in a machine, and then I think it was one that like rotates the effects of the drugs. And so, before that moment, I kind of saw it as just, you just place the right buildings in the right place, whatever the order has to be for the game, dictated by the designer. That's how it has to be. And then I saw that, actually each drug has a kind of grid of effects, and this is a machine that rotates that grid. And then there's a machine that shears off half of it. And then there's a machine that destroys half of it, or merges left half of one, the right half of the other. And it suddenly seemed like really systemsy and kind of juicy open in the way that, that I get excited about. Is Megaquarium, does it have something like that, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, it's so early in development, I need to still create that. But that's definitely the aim. And I think there is great scope for that, because you can, each of these little kind of interactions, if you like, it's like its own little system. And then once you put all those together, so for example, you've got like basic requirements, like the type of food that they eat, the number of times they need to be fed, and the temperature of the water, potentially like pH, although I'm not sure, that might be a little bit too detailed. And then the type of water, fresh water, salt water. So that kind of like breaks down in terms of like, the kind of the types of fish that you can put together, like temperature and salt water or fresh water. But then you've got the interactions between the different fish. So, big boisterous ones might bully little ones. But then if you put in some rocks that create hiding places, then that maybe gives you a place that reduces like the tension level of the tank.
Oh God, it's a stealth game now.
Because the smaller fish have somewhere to go and hide, because if they're being bullied all the time, it stress them out. They might even just die from pure stress, which actually happens. And I'm trying to think of kind of more systems off the top of my head, but you can kind of see how these, like, they all overlap, but they're not like, there's no like right answer. Yeah. It's going to completely depend on what you have available to you as well, because, I quite like the idea of actually, I just got to experiment with it. I like the idea of maybe having limited marketplaces. So potentially like maybe you have like your basic fish, which are always available, but then certain kind of exotic fish could only be available and randomly appear and only be available in certain numbers. It's like, oh, how can I use this one? Well, I can't put it with these fish, but I can put it with those. Oh, I know, I'll set up a tank like this. And you know, the final thing I should mention is, on this topic of like, overlapping systems and like creating combos and synergies and that sort of thing is the decorations. So, the current, way the decorations work is that they'll have like a bit of kind of text, almost, I don't know, like a card in Hearthstone or something. It's like, or any collectible card game of your choice. It will be like +2 ecology points, which is one of the resources you gather, if for every species in this tank with the colourful trait. That's an example of one of them at the moment. But imagine having like 50 of these, all with different traits. Maybe it's like this trait with a size over 5. And so it's kind of, you'll be able to create these little combos between those to like make loads and loads of points.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Pip, as the most enthusiastic person about aquariums on planet Earth.
Oh, hello. Yes.
What would you look for in an aquarium simulation?
Well, I mean, one that it exists, because it's not a thing. Like,
have you thought of that, Tim? Is it going to exist?
I mean, I Google this thing regularly, and until now, I mean, really. And there was a Steam thread a little while ago of people just looking for an aquarium management game, but that's like not quite in this sense, but more in the sense of you have a tank,
like a home aquarium.
Yeah, like a one particular thing. And I think I was saying I have that, it's now called Tap Tap Fish, just on my phone, and I was showing Chris my current sort of layout and the colour that I've chosen for the scheme and the fish that I've currently got swimming around. But I think it's interesting because I think I'd like to be able to guide people through an experience, because I've been to so many aquaria, that I think they're kind of familiar to me, but I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. You know, you're used to the Amazon zone, and you're used to the freshwater bits, and you know what the tropical zone is gonna vaguely look like, and your paths through that, and that there'll probably be a touch tank that you've got some rays in and some starfish and things. And so I'd sort of be interested in ways to maybe think about spaces differently that aren't necessarily what someone has done in real life with limited funding and things that have been in place for decades by that point. So I know that's not really a helpful thing to say, but like, I think I wonder whether I would fall into the trap of trying to recreate, I don't know, Georgia Aquarium or something, or some of the tanks that I've seen. I don't think I would, because we were talking about things like being able to breed fish and what that might do.
Forgot about that bit.
And sorry, this is just to like mention it, so now you are forced. But also, I mean, there are things like, I don't really know at what point it's cool stuff that is from the real world, but I don't know how it would relate to the experience of actually creating it. Like an octopus needs toys to play with, and it needs things so it doesn't get bored. But would you incorporate that in the game if you had an octopus? Would you have to have a staff member that is dedicated to entertaining the octopus, or making sure it doesn't figure out how to leave its tank and sit down
prison
and
architect for octopuses.
Exactly.
No, it's a really good question actually, and it's you know, what I've got at the moment is I think a really good framework for defining these like tasks that need doing in your aquarium. And I'm at the best bit now, which is I pretty much just get to like create all of that gameplay. And so it's just like researching and adding these things. So, you know, I haven't really talked about like staff and that side of the management yet. I've talked a lot about the requirements of the fish and how you might like place, certain combinations of things together that would work well. But the other half of the game, oh man, there's so much to talk about. First, I should just mention, the game at the moment runs on a day cycle, which I think is quite novel. So basically, before the day starts, there's nobody in your aquarium, and you can kind of build stuff and change things around. But then you click open the doors, and then, you've got 8 hours when your staff come in, and they have to do all of the jobs that need doing today within those 8 hours. And also, of course, you've got guests coming in and they're going around your tanks, and that's how you get money and more points to unlock new stuff. So you have to go through that process of a day, otherwise you won't be able to go anywhere. But of course, each day is also like a liability, because if you don't feed your fish, bad stuff might happen. So, so the management side of the game is, you're hiring these different staff, members, and currently it's just one type, which is an aquarist, someone who looks after fish. And at the moment, there's one task, which is feeding the fish. So it's at the very, it's the minimal amount of stuff that's in the game at the moment. But actually, once you've had loads of different types of tasks, like you say, playing with an octopus, different types of feeding, like stick feeding. So that's when you're having to feed a predatory fish, directly with a stick, really time consuming, much harder than just throwing a load of pellets in. And then once you're having to kind of get all these things together, cleaning out filters, doing water changes on the tanks potentially, and probably loads of other stuff I don't even know about yet. I think that could be really interesting, because, it's about prioritizing your staff, making sure they're concentrating on the right tasks, so that those basic things don't slip through the net. Because you can imagine you've got to the perfect stage where all of your fish are getting fed each day. And then a task comes up that doesn't need to be done every day, like cleaning out your filters. This is a kind of mundane example. I should probably be talking about fantastic, awesome examples, but hey. And then suddenly one of your staff members goes off, cleans all the filters, but doesn't do their rounds on the feeding today. And suddenly a load of your fish go hungry. And it's so I love that idea of it having different, length periods between tasks, so that it creates this kind of lumpy graph, if you like, of what needs doing each day. And so kind of managing that each day, I think, could be a really interesting thing that I've not really seen done much in these games, because most of them work on a kind of endless cycle. Prison Architect doesn't. Prison Architect's got a day cycle, so maybe there's some similarities there, but I don't remember anything being especially lumpy on Prison Architect in terms of it varying between one day of the week to another day of the week.
I mean, what is an aquarium if not fish prison?
Indeed.
I don't know, I'm kind of interested as well. And I don't want to just say a load of things as if that's what I think the game should be, but it's, you can.
It's early days, so I'm looking for inspiration.
Here's my list. But no, something that I was thinking about was I'd really like to be able to do something in terms of curating more of an educational visit or something. So I was interested in whether there were going to be maybe remits that you could fulfill, maybe in terms of school visits and having those talks that accompany feeds, or, even just those, having somebody who writes the plaques that go alongside the thing and helps understand, or helps explain rather, what's going on to kids, or, things like that are kind of really cool. But then also when I played it at Res, the build seemed very sort of the tanks could be big but not sort of totally out of scale with people, but some of the aquariums that I've been to have had just totally ridiculous walk through things, or the Georgia Aquarium, just to mention that again, has 4 whale sharks in this enormous, crazy...
football field-sized tank.
Yeah, that is insane.
Ridiculous. And there's a little travelator on the tunnel that you can go in through that, and you're just this is... Are you kidding me? So, yeah, I guess, how do you scale that or scope that so that it isn't crackers?
No, I think it should be okay. It's actually, funnily enough, that's not the end of the spectrum I'm struggling with right now, from a design perspective. What I'm really struggling at the moment is tiny fish, because you put... To kind of even fill a medium-sized tank, the sort of tanks you're talking about, not even that big, with fish, you're... I've got the players currently maybe getting 10, 12 fish, or shoals of fish, within the first 10, 15 minutes of the game, which is kind of quite a lot of different things to manage already. And it's actually what I want to do is get the player building bigger fish as soon as possible, because then, I'd rather the player had kind of maybe 10 to 15 different fish on the go at any one time. I mean, eventually, obviously, it's going to grow, 20, 30. But, so actually, yeah, bigger fish are kind of easier in a way, because it's less kind of individual little guys that need, feeding and all that sort of stuff. It is just a question of scale. And actually, my art style, and from a technical point of view, the art style is relatively, low in geometry. Relatively. It's not super low poly. So actually, scaling just up the models and making big, whale sharks, like you say, or, giant Pacific octopuses or whatever. That's going to be a lot of polys. It shouldn't be too bad, actually. It shouldn't be too hard at all. My artist could put a tank in that fills the screen, like, tomorrow, the prototype haven't got anything to go in there yet that needs that size of tank. So yeah, I think we'll get there. And the idea of having like walkways through tanks, totally. I've gone for this, I could have gone for a system which was more modular, so that, say you place like a corner of a tank and a side of a tank, and then you get to create a tank of any shape, and that would have been cool. But what I actually went for is these, kind of more static, tanks where they just come in a certain shape. But what I like about that is it means that we can put a lot more kind of flair into that design. And so, we can have weird shaped tanks. Anything that my artist can draw can be in the game, rather than having to make sure that it all works into a system. Because I think sometimes it can be, you just got to pick your fights, kind of choose going too far in either direction. And, one stifles the player's creativity, the other one stifles the kind of total flexibility of what you can have in the game.
I'm guessing that maybe one way around it would be that a shoal of smaller fish functions as one fish, and then figuring out like, if they get to a certain point of ill health, it just halves,
totally.
Yeah.
I just put it in the game like last week, so just since Res, which is, in fact, was it since? Was it just before Res? I actually can't remember whether I got it in after or before. But no, I have shoals in the game now, which is really helpful. Definitely, because I was getting so many fish so early, and it just got out of control.
We've all been there.
It's interesting because I guess unlike Big Pharma, there's an argument to be made for almost creative mode in an aquarium game, because aquariums are aesthetically nice things. People like building them. That's the reason.
Have you seen aquascaping?
I haven't.
Oh, there are so many amazing videos online, and it's basically just people decorating tanks in all these amazing, really cool ways. And there's different types of aquascaping, and you can do it so that it looks like there's little bonsai trees growing underwater, and so that you can have like a waterfall made of sand that gets pumped out and that falls down. And it's like, it's amazing. I have so many links that I can send you.
Yeah, I would actually like that. No, you'd be amazed like that. It's. I keep saying it. Like, I've got this really I'm really happy with the framework that I've got at the moment, and I do just want loads of ideas. So please feel free to send me ideas.
I think an octopus's heart stops beating, or one of its hearts stops beating when
it falls in love
of the other sex. Like,
I was joking.
Yeah, like there was a sort of like, it has like a mini heart attack when it's like aroused or something.
Aww. Just be cool, Stephen. Just be cool. Just be cool. Just be cool.
It's quite
just
sweet.
Be cool.
I used to run like a thing on an art blog that I used to do called Octopus Monday, and it was just like a cool thing about octopuses, and it was sometimes more or less tangentially related to art. But
wasn't there a header on your blog, octopus tentacles?
Yeah, like for most of my things, there's usually a tentacle just somewhere around. So yeah, and I think I was like the #1 Google ranking for stop motion octopus porn. I may still be.
Claim to fame.
Oh yes.
Awesome.
Have you ever been to Bristol Aquarium?
Yeah. So this actually. I don't know if this came from you, Pip, because
I think I mentioned it. Yeah.
So basically, my girlfriend actually, I can say this. It's fine. My girlfriend used to work at Bristol Aquarium, so I have quite a good source of info there, and I'd be lying if I said I'd be making this game if it wasn't for her, but it's not for her. She was she made me think of the idea, because I just wouldn't have considered an aquarium game, except we talked a lot about fish,
And seahorses. That was specifically how it came up.
So seahorses. So yeah, my girlfriend used to breed seahorses. In fact, she's bred quite a lot of the seahorses that are in aquariums in the UK, because they've sent them to different aquariums. So yeah, I've been to Bristol Aquarium. It's only twice actually, but, yeah, it's, I have had like the guided tour,
I don't want to brag, but
behind the scenes. You find out which fish are secretly assholes when they're not in front of the public, that kind of thing.
Exactly. I did, it was really cool actually. Her friend, showed me around the back of the aquarium, so behind the tanks, which is really interesting. So that's really helped from a kind of mechanical point of view. So,
So like behind the walls in Portal, where there's like furnaces and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's scary.
belts.
It's a scary place. There are some really cool things. Like I've just mentioned one, which was the one that blew me away, is that when you're a hobbyist aquarium keeper, you have these relatively small like canister filters which do all of your filtering all in one go and in one box. And to get kind of economies of scale, I think, and efficiency, at big aquariums, they have huge filters of the various types. They have one huge pump, one huge mechanical filter, which basically just pumps the water at extreme pressure just through sand. And then another one, which is for the biological filtering, which is basically pouring the water, kind of over these plastic balls which have loads of bacteria living on them. And it's kind of, there's air inside this thing so that it's aerobic bacteria that eats all the ammonia that comes out of the fish poop. Anyway, and this gave me this great idea, which is, well, I think it's a great idea, which is instead of just having a filter per tank, which is what you have currently, you could kind of increase the scale and have a huge filter run through several tanks, which is what, big proper aquariums, often do. So that was kind of cool to find that out.
Yeah.
I liked how, because in the build that I played, obviously it was quite rudimentary, but you were explaining how also the public might fiddle with the filters, and so at some point you start putting them behind a wall, like you'll build a tank flush with a wall essentially, and then take away the wall behind it, put the filter there, and then block it off with essentially a door that only staff can go through, so you've stopped the public from faffing and messing. So I thought that was really cool. Something that I was wondering about, but kind of don't really want to know the answer to in some ways, is there someone whose job it is to scoop out dead fish in the game?
Yeah.
Or can we just pretend that doesn't happen?
I mean, unfortunately...
The coroner.
There will...
Fish autopsy.
I think fish will be able to die. I have been thinking about it, but it will be very, ungratuitous, It'll,
No, like Sniper Elite slow-mo.
Yeah. So
eating a piece of gravel, like going through his intestine.
I could just go for the old-fashioned, blip, and they just disappear, and it comes up, and
or like
Boris
a
has
fish
died.
Spirit, rising from the.
I think that might be the kind
ghost.
of kindest way to do it. But in real life, like a dead fish that you don't find and don't scoop out, it causes havoc because it decomposes and just tanks the water chemistry of a tank. Tanks the tank. And so it could be an interesting gameplay mechanic. It could be a bit like over the top, and like people aren't going to let their fish. I think the only people who are going to let their fish die or get their fish to die regularly are going to be YouTubers, I think, because they'll
God damn those YouTubers.
because it's going to, I guess it could be, I don't know, funny in a sick way. I don't know.
I mean,
It wouldn't be the sickest thing YouTubers have done for laughs.
No.
Said Tom, totally libelously.
I mean, even in video games, like Sniper Elite, for example.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess there's also an interesting, mechanical thing in that if a fish dies and it's in a tank in public view, that reduces the visitor experience. And you have screaming, crying children running out of the aquarium.
Yeah, no.
Which is a great thing to simulate.
Well, unless they get to a certain age, in which case they're like, come look at this!
It's
Dad!
dead!
That one's dead!
But
Look at it!
That then adds to that, bumpy simulation of having something that a staff member then needs to go and deal with.
Yeah, no, totally. No, and that's, looking for those sort of things, like you say, bumpy simulation, it's actually something I'm thinking about a lot at the moment, because currently it's a very static simulation. Basically, once it's set up, pretty much, it will just run itself. But yeah, the kind of fish death thing, it is something that my girlfriend's actually wait a minute. I was about to say keen on. That doesn't sound right. It's actually a really interesting part of their job that, again, not many people would know about, which is they have to do autopsies, because they need to find out why the fish has died. And actually that could potentially be a great thematic feedback mechanism. So, this fish died because it got this disease, or it died because it was hungry, or it was stressed, or whatever.
Is it ever blackmail? Is it ever blackmail?
Yeah.
It's murder, Tom. And then the game goes into just an entirely different mode. It's a detective game.
That would be really cool though, because you could you could choose to, I don't know, investigate fish body, and then it would be it would tell you, the acidity was wrong, or it has a disease and the rest of the fish in that tank are gonna need medicine, or that's really cool.
It was a single shot from 6 miles away.
Yeah.
sniping the fish. This is really disturbing.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, though, like not having that information by default, just knowing it's dead until you assign a SAS member to...
It's something I'm really keen on, actually, and it's something I might end up talking about a little bit later, because I won't go into it now. There's a different game I've been playing, which I think does this really well, basically. Is interesting ways, thematic ways of feeding back to the player, without it just being a kind of really obvious, just a dialogue box comes up and just tells you the information. Because I just think that's kind of cool.
You could get the Crusader Kings events feed in there, where, it's girls up, and every day you have a new set of messages, which could be, obviously we've investigated this fish death and it is starved or whatever, but could also just be the internal politics of a fish tank. If that's something you want to go to depth to, like the Kingdom of Seahorses has brokered a treaty with the Palisade of Clownfish. No, don't do that. That's stupid. I'd play that game though.
They, some of the fish will fight over hiding spots as well, though. So, they will fuck each other up. Proper. That's why you can't put Japanese fighting fish in with sometimes they'll try and mess up their reflections. They'll just be like, oh my god.
I know.
Just calm down.
So for research, I've been reading various books, and it's kind of depressing that every single, nearly every fish, it's either this fish will get picked on by more boisterous species, or this is a bullying fish that will pick on more docile species. There's just so much fighting.
Practical Fish Keeping magazine is good for information on that front. By the way, just as an FYI.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure my girlfriend has a lot of research material for me to dig through.
This fish has the asshole trait.
A lot of them do.
Yeah.
And lots of them outgrow their tanks as well, or people will get them and think that they'll only be little, and then they grow to 6 feet long, and the person's like, I have one regret. Please take this off my hands.
Yeah.
Or you get customs fish,
What?
That get,
right.
confiscated.
Yeah.
And then they need to obviously be looked
I thought
after.
fish that inspect your luggage.
I know, that's what I thought as well.
There are some awesome fish in Bristol Aquarium, actually. Just give another shout out to that aquarium.
It's really good.
In the outside pool, which area I mean, there's some fish that have been donated, and because they grow so big, I can't remember what the species is, but there's this one which acts
Is it whales?
It's no, but there's this one that acts it's like a dog. It's you come up to the side of the pool. It's a pool which is at waist height, so you can actually put your hands in, and it comes up and sniffs at the right at the water level because it knows you got food. We did have food, and you actually just basically pour the food just down its throat. It's just it's huge. It's as big as golden retriever.
Top tip, by the way, I think they still have that uniform. It's been a while since I've been, but if you go to the London Aquarium and you're wearing a bright yellow t-shirt, they think that you've come to feed them, and so the terrapins will all gather up on you, and you're like, I've got nothing, I'm so sorry, I just
disappoint a terrapin by wearing yellow.
So now we're just sharing fish stories. We're actually not talking about games at all at this point.
That's fine. I mean, there's a fish we found out last time we went to Bristol Aquarium, there's a fish there that thinks it's a shark. That's their only way of explaining its behaviour, because it's in the big tank with the little sharks. I think they're not tiger sharks, but the little tiny, relatively small sharks.
Mouse sharks.
Oh, like dogfish.
Yeah, they're like big dogfish. Wolf shark. I don't know. But there's one big fish in there.
Is his name Hank?
It's something like that, yeah. But he just swims he only swims like a shark. He just tries to float. Doesn't really work because he's a fish. He refuses to eat except when the sharks eat, and then tries to eat what they eat.
Yes, I think I've seen
this.
That's
the depth of simulation you're probably not going to go into, which is individual fish ambition.
Hank the delusional fish.
Yeah. Psychological disorders.
But in terms of random events, there's a sort of this fish actually thinks it's this fish.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Oh, there's some lobsters as well that are rescue lobsters as well in places like that. That was cool. I liked seeing them.
This is just things we like about fish now, isn't it, really?
I mean, obviously it was always going to descend into this, really, wasn't it? I mean,
it was inevitable.
The thing I was going to say earlier was that, you play Tap Tap Fish, which is purely a game about building an aquarium that is visually pleasing to you and customizing it. And that's a lot of the appeal of those home aquarium simulators as well. Well,
I'm worried about getting kelp.
We're all worried about that bit.
No, I mean, I've been building towards it for so long, but now it's going to be a green element in my tank that is largely orange and blue. And so now do I want the kelp after I've saved up?
Oh my word.
I know.
These are the sorts of decisions.
A roller coaster. Sorry, you're about
But what I was going to say was that obviously when you have, obviously there's an aesthetic element to building an aquarium within a simulator when you have to earn everything, when, everything is tied to this, the simulation, right? And then the game of it. Would you consider having an optional mode which was just build what you like for the sake of looking at it? Because it's an interesting idea, because it's not something you would have hit with Big Pharma, right? Where no one's going to go like, I just want to watch stuff move. Well, but people do with fish.
Funnily enough, I mean, there is a free build mode in Big Pharma, and I didn't really mind doing that because, I don't know, there was nothing that was really trying to hold back from the player, especially. But with this one, there is that question of like, is it more tantalizing, more exciting, eventually finally getting access to your favorite fish or that, really exotic fish that, and it takes ages to earn the points to unlock it. Is that more exciting if you can't just go into a free build mode where everything is available? I'm not sure yet.
Maybe you have to
what do people think?
You have to have had that fish in the normal mode in order to unlock it in free mode.
Right. That's that's what I
was going to suggest as well.
Yeah.
Because then, you have the stress-free mode of just like, I just want to watch these things swim around and,
Yeah, unlimited money and just kind of build a really nice...
The timer is off, basically. It's just like enjoying the space.
Yeah, that's nice.
Something that I'd like, while we're just making suggestions, or while I'm making suggestions.
During this pitch meeting / podcast.
I love it.
We're going to finish the game by the end of the podcast.
Like, something that I'd be really excited to see is the stuff that aquariums can't actually do in real life. So there's a bunch of stuff that happens, in the deep ocean with like thermal vents and with polychaete worms and with like brine that is heavier than seawater that has lakes within the sea kind of thing. And so it'd be really cool to have that sort of that otherworldly weird stuff that you could have in a tank, and that you could actually sort of curate and get to grips with that ecosystem, even though it wouldn't work in any way, shape or form in the real world, because pressure is different and because the actual sort of just there's so much would be.
It's a really interesting idea, actually. I never even thought of that. So like still basing it on realism, on real life species, fish, and the conditions that they live in, but then taking just a slight trip down fantasy lane and saying, you have like a magic piece of equipment which recreates those conditions, for example, which doesn't actually exist, like some high pressure tank or something like that recreates that thing. Yeah, really cool idea. I hadn't even thought of it before.
Stuff like that would just be amazing, because that's stuff that I've seen in Blue Planet and things like that, but it's not something that I can ever experience in a real setting. But also, I mean, there are elements of it in the Lost, I can't remember, the Lost something biome in Subnautica. Really can't remember what it's called. But it's one that you find quite late on, because it's, gated by pressure and by travel distance and by being really far down, and you sort of finally get to it, and there's this amazing tree-like structure and all of these animals that are sort of versions of ones that you've seen further up, cool. That have, they're different and weird and ethereal looking, and there are all these, brine pools underneath, and it's just so cool. But yeah, so that's the closest I've come to being able to play with it a bit, I guess.
Yeah.
High pressure polychaete worms. Confirmed here.
Well,
let's see. I'm glad people suggest stuff like this to me, because I'm quite, I think I'm quite good at coming up with systems. I think that's a strong point I have as a designer, but I think sometimes I can err on the side of caution when it comes to doing like out there kind of stuff. So yeah, it's actually, I really like getting all these suggestions from people, because it's definitely stuff I wouldn't think of on my own.
Blue Planet's on Netflix. Okay. Just FYI.
Yeah, no, I know. I've been watching.
I'm assuming, but
this is why you finish your game in a reasonable amount of time. It's because you don't have these crazy ideas.
No, that's another reason that it's quite, I think it's kind of, it can be risky because you don't, like your earlier question about when you announce, right? It's risky because you don't know whether people even like the idea, but there is an opportunity for the first period of working on the game to work out what it is you want to do on your own for a bit before those ideas come in. Because that's the reason I announce now and not like 3 months before the game comes out, is there's no time at that point. There's no time to put anything in in terms of feedback from other people. So, it's really nice to have that, but also I'm sure you've had this too, Tom. The game already has like gone through so many transformations. Like the first version, I had no idea even what the mechanics were going to be like. I mean, this day cycle thing's really new, and it commands like so much of the gameplay. And was it going to be one of these games where you kind of everything builds over time, or was it going to be one of these ones where you place it down instantaneously? And anyway, sorry, I'm going into way too much detail here, but like, yeah, this sort of stuff, I need like 9 months to a year just to play around with on my own as well.
Yeah, Heatsinks actually started out being about aquariums, but just the journey it took.
Yeah, no, I can see. Yeah. See this.
You'll find the same thing in a few years down.
Eventually,
mine's going to turn into heat.
Eventually, the pressure to add polychaete worms will drive you away from that theme entirely.
Yeah, I think so.
Into space.
Pip's just like knocking on my door. Worms. Don't know what the word is. What is
polychaete worms?
Polychaete.
Yeah.
Okay. I have
like
to
many
that.
hair worms.
Is that what that means?
Worms that are cute in more than one way.
Moving on.
Oh.
Tom, what have you been playing?
Yeah. I've been playing a bunch of stuff. I think maybe I'll skip Andromeda this time because I know I've played like 15 hours and I will have played another 15 hours by the time we next
Make a noise that sums up how you feel about it so far. Good. All right, moving on.
I played a bunch of indie games, one of which is Golf for Workgroups, which is the rebirth of Golf ? By Alex Austin, aka Cryptic Sea, who makes Sub Rosa and has made a whole load of stuff. But Golf ? I actually forgot that it was him that did that. And that was like, I think it was 12 years ago that game came out. It was like a free demo. It was always in development and it was, unfinished, but it kind of took the PC Gamer office at the time by storm. And, I think the PC Zone office as well, because I've talked to a bunch of people there who are like, oh my God, Golf ? is back, including Will Porter. And all I really remember about it from those days is just that it was like, I remember it being like wireframe, but actually it wasn't. It was just kind of computery looking. And it's a golf game. And when you hit the ball, it traces its arc through the air like a dotted line, almost like a graph. And so you can see exactly where your shot went in retrospect, and it just keeps that in the air for the whole game. So you can see your whole path, and that's really cool. And, playing it again, I can't tell you like what's changed or how much of the stuff I experienced this time is new because it was literally 12 years ago. But yeah, the art style is way cooler than I remember. It almost reminds me of like, oh shit, I can't remember the name of the game now. The really colourful first-person game where you punch like birdmen in the face. Really oddball.
Pac-Man?
Let's start at the beginning and move forward.
Not close. Anyway.
It's not serious, Sam.
No, really oddball.
He looks like a bird. Shush now.
Anyway, it's not that much like that, so it doesn't matter. But giant abstract robots that are kind of frozen in time, stomping through the land. And, the same company did the thing where like the whole world is a giant rolling thing and you're an egg.
I'm not helping,
okay,
am I?
the entire world is being rolled up like a rug and you're an egg trying to escape the giant rolling thing. Or maybe it's not being rolled up like a rug, but there's a giant rolling pin type thing that's consuming the entire world. Okay, you don't know this game.
It does sound like a series of dreams.
Again, it doesn't matter. The landscape in Golf for Workgroups is beautiful and surreal and bizarre and has giant robots and black holes and sort of weird abstract trees. It's actually a little bit like a kind of Darwinia vibe where there's these strange computery things, but it's also quite natural. And you're playing golf on it. And the system for like actually hitting your ball is very mouse and keyboard driven. And it's very much a golf game made by someone who likes like FPS games because it's really just an FPS map that you can walk around freely. There's no formalized a notion of turns or all that happens is if you like interact with your ball, then it switches to swinging mode and you look down on it and you move your mouse. Like there's a 2-dimensional there's two axes of input for the mouse where you swing it towards the ball, but it also matters whether you move it up or down as you hit it to give it spin and stuff. And it's actually quite sophisticated. And then you also have a buggy that is just a drivable FPS vehicle, and there are like ramps and stuff, and you can like boost on the ramps. And then also like hanging in the air, there's just like, I thought it was just a visual effect at first, like a really cool kind of spatial distortion thing that looked a bit like a black hole. And then we realized like, oh, these are dotted above a lake, and they're kind of about the height your ball would go if you tried to get across this lake. And so you hit your ball at it and you realize they actually are gravitational fields, and your ball will arc around them. And so you have to try and aim your shot so it will like curve around this one and then into that one and get flung out from it. And then if it falls in the water, we discovered there's no like, it doesn't automatically reset you anywhere. Turns out we discovered afterwards you can actually reset it manually anytime you want. You can just right click to place your ball. And as long as you are further away from the hole than your ball is, it lets you do that.
Right.
But we didn't know that. And when the balls went in the water, you could just walk into the water, cause both of us failed the black hole thing. And then we're just like chipping it, and it only goes like 1 foot each time you hit it. And we're like, 70 feet from the edge of it. And so my friend Robin was going straight for the hole, which was about 70 feet. And I looked at how slow this was and realized I should just go for the nearest coast, no matter where that is. And that was like 40 feet. So I went away from the hole, but towards the coast, and he went towards the hole. And my strategy paid off, because once I got to the coast, I could get to the hole really quickly.
And so you're just hitting the ball as often as you like. So you're both playing at the same time, multiplayer.
Yeah, the only connection it has to sort of golf rules is that it does track how many times you hit it. So that is your score. So it does actually, it has a par and everything.
It's
but
more,
it's
more
very
like golf than some other golf.
Yeah, it is
games.
actually. Like,
you
it's like being on a golf course.
Yeah. With your buggy that goes up big ramps.
I haven't
just
played
like
this.
Normal golf.
I haven't played this yet, but this new version has a team-based mode where it's because there's like buggies and the ball. Each team just has one ball between them and one cart, I think. And it's just, it no longer counts your shots. It's just who's the first to get their ball in the hole. And so one of you hits it and the other one drives the buggy to where it's going to go and tries to be there when it lands so they can hit it right away.
But doesn't that mean that the person who hit it in the first case gets left behind?
I think maybe there's a buggy per player. I haven't actually tried this mode.
Okay.
But,
there's a cool idea though.
Yeah. I also played Loot Rascals.
Oh, cool.
Have we talked about that at all?
I don't think so. Not since it came out.
I bought it, but in that, what was the thing that they did that wasn't early access? It was something like Early Victory, or it had a cool name for what that thing was.
They did some kind of balancing.
And then
pass.
I ended up not having the free time to play it, and I've wanted to ever since.
It's really charming. It's got a robot with a teapot for a head as the narrator and the star of the trailer. And he's really funny. And it's a strange sort of, it kind of feels real time, but it isn't, in that you're on a kind of, I think it's a hex grid, and you can move freely. I'm playing on a gamepad, and so you just move the stick to walk around smoothly, but actually time is essentially frozen until you move to the next tile, at which point everyone moves forwards one. Yeah,
like time moves when you do, basically.
Yeah, it's the super hot of hex-based loot games. And the combat is incredibly simplistic on its basic level, which is like, there's just enemies hopping around, and if you move into them, you hit them, they hit you, you hit them. If you do like 5 damage and they have 7 health, you'll hit them once, you do 5 damage, and again, you kill them. And they get to hit you once in between that. The only variable about that is that certain enemies will get the first hit in if you attack them during the day, and other enemies will get the first hit in if you attack them during the night. And if you attack them in the other one, whichever that is, you get the first hit in. So if you do 5 damage and they have 4 health and you attack them when it's not their time, you'll just kill them with 1 hit and take no damage.
Sure.
And how much damage you do depends on the cards you've got. So all the loot is just cards, and you have a grid of like 8 cards, I think. And the top row is attack and the bottom row is defense. And when you find a card, it'll sometimes be an attack type or a defense type, and the most basic one just is like 1 attack. And so you put it in the attack slot, and now if you have 4 of those, you've got 4 attack. That's how much damage you do with each attack. But then you'll get one that's like, +1 attack for every other saucer on this row. and it is itself a saucer, and so you get +1 from that, and if you have another saucer, then you get +2 from this card, and then another one will be like, if it's in an odd slot, it will do an extra +1, and then another one will be like, if it's not below or something, it'll have some kind of bonus. And so arranging those is really interesting, like figuring out that grid is really cool. And then you also get sort of frames for your cards, and the frames have an ability attached to them. So one I've had is like teleport, and if you attach that to a card, then it doesn't really matter what card it's on. It's just if you have that at all, then you get the ability to teleport, and after you use it, it's on a cooldown of that doesn't recharge until you've moved around a certain amount. And those kind of make it more interesting to like get past tough enemies and navigate the space. One of them's, I think, just like a fireball. I had one that was like, just like filth. I can't remember what that did. Maybe that was the teleport one. It was like a really weird connection between its theme and what it actually did. But my problem with it is I just find it it's very randomized, and I feel completely at the mercy of the random generation, because if you haven't found any of those abilities yet, literally all you can do is walk into an enemy or not. And at best, all you can do is walk into them when it's not their time, i.e., during the day, if it's a nocturnal creature. And if it has 10 hit points and you do 3 damage, then you're gonna get hit however many number of times that is, but like more than twice. And that means if you only have 2 health, you'll just die. And you can heal by going back to town, but you have to pay to do it. And the only way you can pay to do it is by sacrificing cards. And if you haven't filled all your slots yet, then you're sacrificing a card that's actually giving you like a health point a defense point or an attack point, which is just going to make you even worse, and you're going to fail even more. And whether or not you find a card at all is totally random. So if you can kill like loads of creatures and just get nothing. There's literally no cards, have no choices, nothing, no decisions to make. There's nothing you can do. And then if you can't get past, if there's like a tough enemy that you can't find a way past, you don't have any abilities to get past it, you don't have any ways to fight it, you don't have any way to get better, all you can really do is fail. And I find that to sort of a lesser extent, just in general, even when I do have a full set of cards or I get like one ability, I've got this ability, but I can only use it once before it's got to recharge, and I've used it now, so I'm in the same situation where there's this thing that's just got like 26 health, and yes, I can do 8 damage, but that's not enough to survive this thing. I'm just going to die of attrition. And it feels like there's so little wiggle room for you to use smart decision making or like rearranging those cards. I would love to be rearranging those cards in clever ways to unlock like, oh shit, if I put this one here, I can actually get enough damage to kill this guy in one hit. But I just can't because I've got no cards to play with. Like there's no options available to me. I kind of want to skip like the middle of this game. Where I feel like there would be enough.
And you can kind of use your skill to actually do better. I mean, I've not played it, so I don't want to make any I don't want to criticize it, because I, don't
give it a review score.
Just based on what you're saying. It sounds like there's something I thought about a lot with the development of Big Pharma, and it's in some ways something that I didn't do well, but there are some things that I did do well. Anyway, and one of those is the way you handle the randomness, and there's different types of randomness. I think in two major categories, and one is like true pure randomness, where you literally roll a dice every time you make a decision. So like, is there a card in this enemy? Roll a dice if it's above 15 and out of 20, or just like 1 out of 4. You can tell I used to play D&D. Then then there's a card, right? Yeah. The other way is like a bucket based randomness, or like picking something out of a bag, right? A vessel of your choice, a hat, a bucket, a bag, and so
deck of cards.
You're guaranteed to have the same number of things, but they're going to appear in different places. And I think generally that type of randomness can be a lot more balanced, but it still makes every playthrough different.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good way to go with this style of game.
The thing is, do you not think that? So, listening to you talk about that's how I feel about literally all systems-driven games that you love. I'm like, well, that was random. I've got no sense of how I could have dealt with that differently. I'm going to have a pizza. Maybe this is more for, like, the other end of not to, like, defend or attack the game, because I've only played like 5 or 10 minutes of it before I realised I wouldn't have time for it. But like, I wonder whether it occupies a particular niche that isn't super systems driven people. But the other thing is, I was talking to someone today earlier and they were saying that they really liked I think there's like a daily challenge or something. So is that a thing that changes things up in a meaningful
yeah, there is a daily
way,
challenge.
or...
I can't remember if I've played it,
okay.
but I wasn't sort of, I wasn't mega interested in it just because I was struggling so much just with the basic game and just like I can get so...
Fair enough. I was just wondering if it altered the mindset in any way.
Yeah, I mean, in general, in games where randomness can screw you over, I like daily challenges as a kind of antidote to that because you can say, well, my friends got equally screwed over, but of course you need friends who are also playing it, and if you don't have any, then it doesn't help. And also, I probably just discovered that my friends are way better at it somehow.
It wasn't random.
There's also
at
a lot
all.
of like, yeah, there is some, I guess, I don't know if finesse is the right word, but there's some variance to how you maneuver and how enemies maneuver, and they're trying to move towards you most of the time, but some of them move away from you. Maybe there's some really, if you totally understand that logic, there's ways to be really tactical about it and force the tough ones to move away from you. I can't really imagine that happening. But, I mean, perhaps it guarantees that that the enemies on the level, if you took them in the right order, would give you enough points to level up to be able to take on the toughest ones. It doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like you get runs where there's no way I could have taken on that guy. He just has so much health and I haven't been given any cards at all to play with.
I think I'm going to try and get some time in this week to play it, simply just because, I mean, I own it, and so, you know, there's no reason not to, but also because I'm interested in whether it is a thing that perhaps someone who isn't as systems oriented when it comes to games would either experience differently or sort of have a better relationship with almost. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know. I also played a bit of Unexplored, which is a top-down roguelike, which I was reminded of today because a friend of the podcast, Mike Cook, did a video on it. I'd heard him rave about it, and I was really looking forward to seeing his video on it because I did like it, but I can tell I didn't like it nearly as much as he did, or I hadn't got to the bits that he liked. And yeah, it's really interesting to watch him play because it is incredibly deep. It's a top-down roguelike that is vaguely reminiscent of like the Cell stage of Spore, right up to the point that your character looks a bit like a Cell stage thing from Spore with a big goggly eye that kind of peers around as you move around. But the combat is, like Spore, physics-based. So you're holding like a sword in front of you, but whether it does damage depends on whether it collides with an enemy or not. And so as you turn around, you are sort of changing whether it's going to clip an enemy or fail to clip an enemy. So you have to be very precise about it. And you can get like a shield, and that will, physically block anything that comes in, that physically hits it. So it's all about precise positioning and physics rather than dice rolls or hit points. There are hit points, but
what was it called again?
Unexplored.
Unexplored, okay.
And it's randomly generated. It's a lot like a roguelike in every other way. It's just very real time and very physicsy. And so you find scrolls that you don't know what they do, and you have to use them to find out. And it also randomly generates puzzles. And I think I missed a whole load of the stuff because I just didn't understand it. There's just like a whole load of levers, a whole load of doors, and I pulled some levers and some of the doors opened, and I muddled my way through. I never got stuck because I couldn't open a door, so I didn't really engage any further with that system. And then I just got killed by things that were just too tough for me. But watching Mike play, he finds like a library and reads a bunch of books, and then like 2 floors later, he's like, oh yeah, I remember a book was telling me about these 4 pedestals, and because there's a key next to one of them, the book said, 1 pedestal is key, and that means I must take the artifact from that pedestal, and now the door will open. And that works. It's like, holy shit. And it just has loads of those. He's been playing that for ages, and he's still discovering loads of new elements and weird shrines and stuff in it.
Is it the same game every time?
No, it's very randomly generated, but when you die, you have the option to replay that exact same dungeon, which is really interesting. I haven't seen that in other roguelikes. So if it's like, oh, I got killed by the thing because I didn't understand it, you could just have another go, and then now you do understand it.
You'll start from exactly the same. You'll just completely restart it. But it's just the exact same dungeon. So if you wanted to, you could just play the same dungeon over and over again.
Yeah,
forever.
and try and perfect it.
Interesting. That's cool. Actually, I quite like that.
Yeah, I think there's no reason to stop the player doing that. Well, actually, it'd be interesting to hear Derek, you talk about this, because I think he would argue that the randomness gives it a sense of mystery. Like you encounter that thing that one time and now you can't get to it again.
Who is the developer? Do you know?
I don't know, but I think it's a friend of Mike's, and he talked about like it has been kind of lauded in academic circles for being a really interesting example of procedural generation from an academic point of view, and he thinks that's almost a shame because he thinks all the rest of the game design is incredibly smart. Really, we should just have Mike on here talking about this. Not me.
That sounds good.
We should invite Mike back on, the returning indie guest tour. Speaking of which, Tim, what have you been playing? I realised I asked you about your game, but not what you've been up to.
So, I have been playing quite a lot. I've been getting my retro on. I've been playing quite a lot of Roller Coaster Tycoon. Right. This is my theme park management game of choice. I haven't played Planet Coaster yet, partly because I don't like playing games that are like new games that are in a similar genre, because it makes me feel weird when I'm still working on a game. I'll play it after my game comes out. Anyway, and man, Roller Coaster Tycoon, it's still so good. I love it so much. I'm playing number 2, I should mention. And one of the things that I'm really enjoying about it, one of the things I think is really interesting, is the way it feeds back to you in a thematic way. It's like what we were talking about earlier. And the thing I'm talking about in particular is guest thoughts. So, for any particular ride, you can go and see what guests are thinking about it, or any particular stall. Or even you can just get a list on it for your entire park. And, I love this because it gives you little hints like, this ride is too intense, or is not exciting enough, or it's too expensive. And it's a bit like the autopsy thing. It's a really nice way, it's a really
this
nice
ride
way
has
of
killed this person.
And I didn't realise the last time I played was quite a few years ago, and I guess, I don't know, wasn't as an experienced gamer. And I use this system all the time. Like, as soon as I build a ride, the first thing I do is go check out the thoughts. And I just thought, oh man, that's such a great thing. And I've not seen it in that many games. Like, I have no idea if Planet Coaster does it. It probably does. But I think that's super sweet. I've also been playing up game, so I don't have any like little hidden gems to tell you guys about, unfortunately. But hopefully, I can say some interesting stuff about the games I have been playing. So I recently got back into Hearthstone. So
was that for the expansion?
That's right. So the expansion just came out, and I actually haven't played for the last 2 expansions. I haven't played for about a year. But Day9, one of the YouTubers I watch, he was playing some Hearthstone and the new expansion, and so I dove back in, and oh Blizzard, you're just so good. Like, I just admire what they do so much. As soon as I get in, it's like, we haven't seen you for a while. Here's some free cards. I'm like, oh, thank you. That night, I'd already given them more money. Like, they're so good. They had this starter pack. Anyway, no, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about monetization. That's not, that's people have talked about that a lot. What I want to talk about,
even though it's such great value and makes you feel so good.
Yeah. What I want to talk about is, something I hadn't thought about before. It's actually something that Day9 said. I'm just completely copying him. But
let's get Day9 and Mike Cook on this podcast.
Yeah, that would be better. But basically, he said that there's kind of 2. I'm paraphrasing, but there's 2 ways to enjoy Hearthstone. So if you've got enough money, or you do it as a job, you can just buy all the cards, and then you can have loads of fun just creating really wicked combo decks. You don't have that annoying thing of like, oh, I'm missing that one card that makes this deck work. But you're missing out on another way of playing the game, which is enjoying that curve where you're always unlocking new cards. And so over a long period, you're getting new decks that you can create. And that's quite exciting when you open up that card pack and you're like, oh, there's 4 different cards I haven't even got yet. This might open up some new possibilities. And yeah, I just thought that was really interesting, because up until now, I'd always thought, I wish I had all the cards. But actually, last few days, with that new perspective, I've been thinking, I'm actually getting more excited about kind of grinding. I know it sounds weird, but like, actually that adds it's a game within a game. Like, you know what I mean?
For reasons beyond the video game scope of this podcast, I've come around on the idea of CCGs as opposed to LCGs, like limited card games, where things are sold in fixed sets, which I always thought was the best way to do it.
Me too.
You spend a certain amount of money and you get the cards rather than some of the cards with potential for duplicates.
Yep.
I'm coming around for the idea for similar reasons, I think. But I think with Hearthstone specifically, something I realized was that I think there is, the flip side to that is that there is, particularly when new expansions come out, and I think I was a little bit like you, that I hadn't played the game for about a year and I'd missed 2 expansions or 1 expansion. There's the fatigue of like, oh boy, I've got some road to travel in order to get back into this. And I actually jumped back into Hearthstone as well, but I immediately just found myself going, I could explore this rabbit hole of the last 2 expansions in the previous one. Or I can just do what I've always done, which is play a silly deck that I've had since whatever it was called, the Cthulhu expansion is.
Yeah.
And just do that because it's funny, and then do nothing else with that game. And I've sort of tempered the randomness just by only doing one thing, because that's the sort of way to pass time with it, because I'm unlikely now to spend any more money on it or invest anything in it. But it sounds like you have clicked with it in the I'm back into this way rather than the...
I don't know. I just, it was just they gave me enough to kind of get back into it, and I suddenly got a load more packs, and I was like, oh, actually, maybe I could do some stuff here. They've got this whole, standard versus wild thing.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a double-edged sword. In some ways, it's great because there was couple of expansions that have just rotated out that you can no longer play with in standard mode. You can still play with any cards you own in wild. And so I missed a couple of expansions, and I have no cards from them, and I kind of don't care because in standard, no one else is playing with those either. So it's a bit of an equalizer. You only have to kind of collect the cards in the most recent expansion. At the same time, you have this niggling doubt, which is, so in like a year or two, all of the cards from the new expansions now are going to rotate out. So can I be bothered to get them? So it's a real tricky one, because in some ways it makes me want to play more now, but it's also making me not really want to get any of the new expansions. It's making me want to just get the core classic cards, which never rotate out. So yeah, tricky. Now, the final game I have been playing, I don't know if you'll have heard of it. It's kind of another smallish game. It's called Dota 2. Yeah.
Chris's arms are raised in triumph.
So I've been playing, I first played it, had a little play around with it a couple of years ago, and I'm just getting back into it, and now I'm playing it quite regularly. I still haven't played online yet. I've only played against bots.
All right. All things in time. It'll take many years to ruin your life.
Yeah. But, it's so good. And kind of, talking about those, the curve that I was talking about, with Hearthstone, in terms of like, you get that, gain in power over a long period as you're gaining new cards, and that's exciting. Now, what Dota 2 does amazingly well is you get to experience the entire power curve every time you play. So you start off level 1, and I'm sure people have said this before, but it's such a great way of kind of looking at the kind of two extremes of the spectrum. And of course you've got that balance, which is basically also every time you play, you go back to square one at the end of it. So you can't keep any of your progress apart from like aesthetics and stuff like that. No gameplay improvements. Whereas in Hearthstone, if you play for 2 hours, you can say, I have more cards than I used to have. I think it's really interesting. And yeah, I just like those two examples from kind of looking at a power curve.
I suppose it's most pronounced in Dota, because obviously every MOBA has the thing of you go through your level curve in the context of a match, but Dota is the only one I can think of that has no form of out-of-game progression. You're not unlocking characters, you're not unlocking skills for your account.
You do have that ridiculous, badge that up levels, it's like, oh, well, now you're a tango.
It does. You do have a cosmetic
now
level.
It's all cosmetic, though, yeah.
But, totally. It's not like you're buying, it's not like you're getting points that you put towards new characters or anything else that could be perceived as...
Who do you play as, by the way? Or everybody?
All... No, God, I haven't played Dota in over 2 months, which is kind of crazy for me. This is the longest break I've ever had, and it was purely because of, I don't even know why. I've started to feel it recently. I've started to feel the pull. I think what happened was I got more into tabletop games for my competitive side, and then just sort of socially, without the right people together, I lost the rush to play Dota by myself, which is probably the biggest thing. Maybe I want to go back. We shall see. But no, I think you having a main in Dota is the way you learn, and then because the game gives you no reason to focus on one character because you don't level up for that specific character, you don't, in terms of your account, you haven't spent any money on that character. So now it just sort of expands out into this sort of
kind of. I don't know. I find that it does encourage you to main because you get so much abuse if you ever step outside your comfort zone.
To some extent, yeah.
So I will play Witch Doctor and Lich until the end of time because, because I'm decent at them, but also because it's just not worth spending 50 more hours trying to get adequate at something else.
Do you find it's a huge step in terms of your play level when it
tanks. It absolutely tanks, but the MMR does not reflect that at all because it's but you're good at the other 2 characters in this 100+ character game.
Yeah, I suppose that was a very specific answer for me because I never specialised, so I always played very broadly. I've got friends, including Pip, who are really, really, really good at specific heroes, and I've always been a generalist, so I've always just played a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Axe is probably my most famous Axe man. Probably
I love a bit of Axe.
Last
one I played as Axe, actually. Me and my brother Philip, he's just getting into it with me, and so yeah, we played against bots on easy, and I'm not good in any way, but like I have probably played like 30-40 games now, so I'm getting to that point compared to my brother who's played like 5.
When you played 40 hours of a game, you are 1% of the way.
Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, against like easy bots now as Axe, I just like, his ultimate, which is like refreshes if you kill someone, I'm just like, splam, splam, splam. Yeah, it's fun. And then I'll play online eventually, and it'll be like, I'll die just so much.
I don't know. You might find that you have an amazing honeymoon period of just, I actually know what I'm doing. I'm going to stomp everyone for about, 20 games, then you're like, oh no,
I've reached 200 MMR now everyone beats me. I know, that's the weird thing about these games. I mean, they have to work like this. It's the only way the system balances, is basically they have to aim for you to win half your games. Like they'll put you at an MMR so you win half your games, unless you're slowly improving, and then you'll win a little bit more than 50% and your MMR will slowly increase. But it's this weird thing, which is, it's kind of sad when you reach a higher MMR, because you will lose more. Whereas that road up must feel amazing if you're just naturally, pretty good at it. I don't know.
When I switched to League of Legends, because I actually play more League now, I found that because obviously it was calibrating my MMR as a new player, because I was, and it was a new account and everything like that. But it was a new account with 2,000 hours of Dota behind it. And so it was like, hello. And I would get because it has this thing where it figures out, it doesn't MMR you, but it doesn't sort of stick you in an outrageously high MMR thing straight away, but it sort of tries to detect if anyone's smurfing and pairs you with other people it thinks are. So I would get shouted at from people with smurf accounts because they would be really angry that I didn't seem to know League of Legends specific terms. And I was like, no, I'm genuinely new.
So smurfing is where you're a high level character, but you start a new account to seem low level?
Yeah, and to just sort of either stomp on newbies or to maybe just play with friends who are lower than you, and it's just easier that way. Or to play incognito. Some people do that. But so the majority of my time in League nowadays is spent in ARAM, which is the all random, all mid, just one single lane of stuff. And because I find you still get the power curve experience of getting a lot more powerful, of actually sort of seeing a change in your character over time and their ability to do things and curating that somewhat. But you don't lose quite as much time, and people aren't as inclined to get angry because it's more of a throwaway thing, because you don't have as much control over the character, and it's not as time sinky and as role dependent, and people will maybe sometimes leave, or they won't take it seriously and they'll just dive or whatever, but you can do your own thing, and I still get pleasure out of getting my kill death assist ratios to where I want them to be, or absolutely dumping on someone as Braum, who's like a support character. It's just like, hello, 35, 119. Enjoy that.
Yeah, I definitely, there's definitely a thing when you've played a certain amount of Dota, and Dota was my first MOBA, and I played a lot of Dota. And when you go and play a different MOBA, it's it's an amazing feeling. Until all these games have their skill caps, and you will get MMR'd eventually. But while it catches up, because Dota is the hardest one, so they're all.
HOTS was just an amazing.
I still play. So actually, I played quite a lot of Heroes of the Storm recently, partly because I'm writing about it, but I'm working on some Heroes of the Storm stuff. But Heroes of the Storm is I have appreciation for that game now. I do. I think it fulfills a purpose. It's a very teamwork focused game, but it's not very focused on anything else. Dota is all games in that regard. In that genre, at least, it is the sort of omni game. And most of the games have picked out one or two things from Dota that they will do to the same degree of complexity, and then they'll make other things simpler. The thing Heroes of the Storm has retained, I think, is to some degree sort of teamwork on both a map level and a specific level. It's just almost everything about the game is really easy. But because everything else about the game is really easy, and online no one has ever cooperated with another human being under any circumstances, it means that ultimately it comes down to sort of, apart from just moving around the map at the right time, a sort of Dota, any level of Dota finesse makes HOTS super gratifying, which is cheating. It's full on cheating, really. But like, it's a great feeling. I had the same thing with Smite when I started playing Smite, and it didn't know where to put me MMR wise. And I won my first 18 ranked games in a row, and it was like, and then you talk about it wants you to be in a 50% win rate, and the system's just like, I don't fucking know. Like
18 in a row. Like, where do I put this person?
Put him against the king.
Yeah, exactly. And then you sort of get destroyed for a bit. And eventually you start to hit friction. And Dota's the only other game, because Dota was my first game, it was all friction all the way. It was all difficult forever. And so I stuck with it. Whereas every other game, I basically played until it started to get hard, and then I've just like, fuck this. Like, if I wanted a challenge, I'd go play Dota. So all I wanted to do was be good at something for a while, unlike Dota. And that applies to everything now. Like, I played so much For Honor. Actually, For Honor was probably the game that took me out of Dota, thinking about it, because I started to play that competitively and take that seriously, and I got like through the prestige thing once, and then it was like, oh, this is hard now. And, you know.
It's weird. It's a bit like gambling. It's a zero-sum game, and it feels obviously really good if you're winning lots of games, but you got to remember at the same time, like, if you're stopping people, that means there must be people who are losing the exact same proportion. It could be spread out over multiple people, but they're losing the exact same amount that you're winning more than them, because it's a zero-sum game. It's got a thing, with like poker or something like that. If you win, you're like, great, but I have just taken all my friends' money.
It's a misery factory. It's my favorite game, but it's a misery factory.
That's why I like the ARAM stuff, because it's like, well, if the people on my team aren't taking it seriously, I don't think the others are either. And so it's just, it doesn't feel as damaging to anybody's life.
Yeah, I kind of like the brawls in Overwatch for that reason as well. Is like, you sort of feel like no one really cares whether they win or lose. It's just, and also like every time they patched a class in TF2 because everyone just played that class and the whole team strategy just went to hell. And like, neither of us are going to do anything worthwhile here. We're all pyros and we're all immune to pyros. So.
Yeah, it's like, it's interesting. The whole tone of the Dota community is set entirely by the fact that it is about coping with how unhappy you are, which is very hard to.
Wow.
So it's hard to just locate any other form of entertainment where it's like that. You know, almost everything is defined by the struggle, right? Like by managing your own misery, by managing the misery that you face from other people.
Like camping.
Yes, like camping. It's all like camping.
Yeah, gosh, that's the days, aren't they? Counter-Strike. And others, obviously. Oh wait, you meant other type of camping.
Yeah, no, we meant literally outdoors.
You actually meant outdoor camping. Sorry.
It's terrible.
Oh my God, I took a completely different route on that.
But I mean, to be fair, that seemed valid as well. So I was like, yeah, sure.
That works.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? I watched, I am scared to go play against real people, just cause so I watched quite a lot of high level Dota, and I watched like Purge.
Have you been watching the Purge and Day 9 thing?
Yeah, that's
probably why you got into it, right?
That's, no, the funny thing is that is why I got back into Dota. It's also why I got back into Hearthstone, to start watching more Day 9 stuff. Anyway, but, and like, I think like Purge, I think he seems like a good guy, but then every now and again he's just like, oh, what's this guy doing? He's rubbish. And I'm just like, that could have been me. Like, that guy's probably like 10 times better than I am. So that idea that you just can't escape that criticism. I don't do criticism very well.
Dota's going to be interesting.
Been a game developer.
Yeah, I mean, learning to Dota is it's like, you have to accept how, like, I mean, Purge's guide to Dota, the famous one, is called Welcome to Dota, You Suck. And it's because you have to internalize that. You have to internalize how terrible you are before you're allowed to get better. And again, this is not something that most forms of entertainment, particularly power fantasy entertainment, like games, asks you to consider. Like, there's no one's made a single player game about how fucking awful you are. You specifically. Not everyone else, you. Like, there's no Call of Duty where you were the worst man in the army and everyone else is better and no one else wants you to be there.
Like, negligence of duty.
Your sprint meter just like runs out way before all of your squad mates, and they just run on ahead and the battle's over.
Your gun seems a lot louder than theirs. It's scary to fire it.
Yeah. It keeps jamming. They should make that.
Someone really should make that. But that would be Dota, right? That is Dota. It is, it's anti-entertainment.
Feeling quite at ease with my decision to not play Dota.
Yeah, I miss it. I really do miss it.
You're going to play now?
Right now, actually, in the time around. No, I'm not.
Well, if you don't mind, like, holding the hand of a noob, like,
I'd totally
love if you guys fancy having a game sometime.
Yeah, totally. I don't know how the hell it's going to matchmake that. Actually, it probably won't. Will it let
I
us
don't
play
know.
together?
It wouldn't let us play ranked, as in because
play
it wouldn't
unranked.
ever let me play ranked with Sean. With
It won't let us play ranked.
Shane,
we can
rather.
we can play
Sorry.
unranked. Yeah, ranked. It puts a MMR differential restriction on it.
It makes sense. It'd be
Yeah,
unfair.
but you never know. You might have a hidden MMR of 4K or something. In
I
which case,
doubt that.
I do not, but I don't care.
yeah, God,
Used to. That was a miserable time
Yeah.
of my life
Indeed.
and yours as
yeah.
a result.
do miss it though. Don't know why.
Not that.
So what have you been playing, Chris?
Well, I've been playing. So, actually, one thing I did want to mention quickly was that I've been playing. I did actually play the Overwatch event last night because I completely forgotten I'd done this. The Overwatch PvE thing they've added.
Oh, yeah.
We mentioned it last week without knowing
Is
anything
that
about
Tracer
it.
thing?
No, it's the Tracer's in it, but it's their
Man versus machine.
man versus gentleman versus Robert mode. But actually, it's pretty good. In fact, it feels like playing. You know, they were trying to make Titan, which was their shooter MMO for years and years and years. They tried to make the game for about 6-7 years. It died. They cancelled the project and made Overwatch instead out of that game's multiplayer mode. That's how Overwatch came to be. This new, basically it's set in the King's Row map, but it's set in like, during the backstory war that's taken place
Yeah,
before
isn't it
Overwatch.
like Tracer's
terrible
first
backstory
mission
was.
from 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's Tracer's
right?
first mission, yeah.
But because the whole thing takes place, no, it's 7 years in the past, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And each of you picks a character from Torbjorn, Tracer, Reinhardt, and Mercy. No duplicates, so each one just has to pick a role. And then it's pretty straightforward, like objective based PvE, essentially. Like you're fighting against waves of robots, there are multiple robot classes, all kind of new stuff. You have to capture points at first and get through a couple of different capture points and survive waves on each point. And then you have to defend a payload for a while, and you have to push that payload all the way to the end, and then you have to fight a boss. And it's straightforward stuff, but it takes about the same amount of time as a WoW dungeon would, I guess. And actually, it really makes me think, oh, this is what instances would have been like in Titan. It really feels like this is a single dungeon instance. Like, does anyone want to run? This is called something like Assault on King's Row or something. And I can imagine in my mind's eye the chat channel in an MMO saying like, I'm looking for one more for Assault on King's Row. It really feels like that. It feels like the closest they've ever gotten to Titan, or what Titan was probably going to be. It's actually quite fun. It's nice, having a version of Overwatch where you have the same powers, but loads of enemies, like little robots, big robots. And then there are sort of cameo appearances by, like, there are enemy robots that are the same type as Bastion. They're not Bastion, but they're, Bastion type robots, and there are Orisa type robots as well. And so those are sort of a little throwback. Everything else is new, and so you have like lots of tiny little robots that charge up and start to do loads of damage to the payload if they can get close to it. I'm playing as Reinhardt, who's pretty much my Overwatch main. You're sort of sweeping them away with its big blows of hammer, and it's really satisfying. And it still puts a play at the game at the end when, for whoever did like the most damage in one go. And you get a box with stuff in it, and it's quite nice. It's a really simple thing, but it was pretty nice. But the reason that's the only thing I've played is because I just got back from Star Wars Land. Orlando Calrissian. Exactly.
I laughed.
Thanks. I keep trotting out variants in that joke. Mixed success rate.
I love how you didn't actually even ever try it with me.
I did.
No.
I did.
Oh, did I just not get it?
You didn't understand it to the extent that you didn't even think I'd try.
Oh, okay. No, I did not register with that one.
Saying
No.
random words? Okay.
Yeah. I thought you said he was the opposite of Han Solo.
I said, only the Millennium Falcon.
What?
Han, Orlando.
Oh, no, I didn't get that. I looked at you for a while.
Okay.
Tim gets it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just like, no, it is Han Orlando, right?
Yeah.
Like, sure.
Orlando, Florida.
I don't get it. No.
Let's not get into this again. This joke has had more airtime than it ever deserved. But, so I was there for the Star Wars Land, which, I went to last year, which was nice. Good things about that show. There were things that I don't like about that show. But the reason I was specifically there was for work, and it was to see the, announcement of Battlefront 2, which, was sort of, the trailer leaked the week before, but it was sort of formally announced and trailered over the weekend. And I've been obviously very, vocal on the pod about the things I like and predominantly don't like about the first Battlefront. When I say the first Battlefront, I don't mean Battlefront 1 or Battlefront 2. I mean Battlefront.
Yeah.
Hang on,
annoyingly.
what?
Because there was the Battlefront 1 and 2 came
But
out.
didn't they call it Star Wars Battlefront, right?
Yeah, well, the first one was Star Wars Battlefront.
Right.
Then there was Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Was it?
Yeah.
But what's
What's the
this?
latest one before this? What new one?
Star Wars Battlefront.
Right.
They've
Which
repeated-
is the one you didn't
They're just
like?
repeating the whole thing.
Star Wars Battlefront.
Which one? The first or the third?
The third.
Right, yeah. You didn't like it. Interesting. I have to talk about that another time.
Right.
Which one's the one about World War One?
Battlefield.
Right. Okay. No, I was completely not thinking of the right game.
Lego Star Wars.
Live long and
Knights
prosper.
of the Old Republic. The reasons I didn't like, I mean, and I played a bit of Battlefront last night to try and share myself out of this. I just didn't enjoy it as a shooter. I don't think it had the depth for it. I think it's
Sure.
a beautiful looking, amazing
Smells
looking
of
game.
yogurt.
And the sound.
Yeah. Like,
That's the only thing I remember about that. I saw it at E3, but they made us queue in a line that I think it had like the fake smoke stuff, but it smelt like yogurt. And so we were just there for about 40 minutes waiting to play Star Wars Battlefront. And then all I can't remember anything about it except there was a lot of snow and it smelled like yogurt.
Hoth smells like yogurt.
Yeah.
Uh,
This isn't helpful, is it?
no.
No.
Anyway. But yes, but so, I think it's a beautiful looking game. I actually bought the season pass partly because I just wanted to be in all of those environments and each new recreation of a set. And it's an amazing feeling and sounding thing. I don't think it's a very well designed shooter, unfortunately, in terms of it has the potential to create interesting moments, but they don't happen frequently enough to justify the randomness of the systems and things like that.
Yeah, I'm tempted to agree. I did a little blog post about it. It's very much at the casual end of the market. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's very much a deliberate decision the way it is, and I think it'll appeal to a certain type of person. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of it feels quite random, and it feels like you feel like you get punished by randomness quite a lot.
Yeah, it feels like I think it's possible to go for the audience they're obviously going for without making the mistakes that they made. It's possible to make an accessible shooter that, doesn't feel as random for people. Simply the fact that I think it's very hard to tell the difference between all the weapons. I think that's something
It's a fair point.
like, it's really hard to tell what each gun is good at, and that's just confusing. It's actually counter to the aims of the game. But anyway, that's Battlefront 1. So they announced Battlefront 2, and the full disclosure thing I should do is that my friend Mitch works on this. So my friend Mitch Dyer, who's formerly of IGN, is, I think, a good mate, and he's one of the two writers on this with Walt Williams.
Part of your sort of Dota scene, right?
Yeah, he co-ran the Recreational, which was the
That was a good work.
Yeah, I became friends with Mitch through Dota, actually. And so the full disclosure is, he is my friend. He's making Star Wars now. And he is the co-writer of the single player version, which is new, with Walt Williams, who wrote Spec Ops: The Line, which is a very well written, well received, third person shooter.
And also one of the great American poets. It's a joke, because I keep getting confused with Walt Whitman.
Yeah, I keep trying to say that as well.
Well, I kept thinking he was going to start talking about Johnny Cash because of Walk the Line. So,
Oh my god.
I don't think any of us are doing particularly well this evening.
And yeah, so, I can talk about, I didn't really see very much beyond what was shown on the stage, during the presentation, which obviously went out to the public, so that's all out there. But the things I find interesting about it are that, well, for one thing, the scope of the game has become so much bigger. So it now has a single player campaign, and the multiplayer will involve all three eras of Star Wars. So it'll have Clone Wars stuff, it'll have the original trilogy, and it'll have New Trilogy, which is kind of nuts from an expanded production point of view. But the thing about that is the first game was made by DICE, but this is being made by DICE, Criterion, and Motive. Motive being Jade Raymond's new studio. So the single player is being made by Motive, the multiplayer is being made by DICE, and all of the vehicle stuff is being made by Criterion, who did, I believe, Criterion are Burnout, aren't they?
Is that right?
I think so, yeah. So they're a racing game developer, basically.
Yeah.
And they're being put in charge of all the vehicles, which I think is, speaking to them, and I'm writing some stuff about this, is actually an interesting, it's easy to see that big multi-studio development thing is dystopian, but I think in the right circumstances, if you're locating something that each studio is good at, then it could work. I mean, it's kind of, it's mad ambitious, but it's also, the fact that they're broadening the scope of it this much is also kind of one of those kind of mad things of just getting one of those eras right would have been enough. But
Did Battlefield 1 have a single player component?
Battlefront 1.
Sorry, yeah.
And not really.
Not really.
There are also two Battlefield
versus
ones.
bots. They haven't.
And it was lame.
No story campaign.
And so all of this stuff is, all that stuff is just multiplayer.
Is the Clone Wars stuff the bad stuff?
Yes.
Like the
prequels.
Original,
Yeah, it was the
like,
second prequel.
Not original trilogy, yeah.
Yes.
Prequels.
Okay. I was going to call it the Prilogy. So
That's pretty good.
Yes. It is.
okay. So
Well,
why
actually-
are they still? I didn't think that those were. Hang on, they're the ones that are allowed to exist, right? It's the alternate universe that
The
isn't.
expanded universe was made non-canon.
Oh, for God's
Yeah.
sake!
But, like, this is why we have a separate podcast where I attempt to explain Star Wars.
Is Mara Jade still canon?
No.
Oh, damn.
She's actually one of the characters that doesn't come back, which is interesting. But actually, so that's an interesting, handing off point, because, one of the things that really struck me is, so they announced the single player, and the single player sounds really interesting in scope, and this is the thing where I'm wary of, sort of bigging it up too much, because literally my friend wrote it, which is such a weird experience for me, and not having opinions on Star Wars, but it's about, the single player will be about a, Imperial Special Forces unit that, led by, a woman called Iden Versio, who vow revenge on the rebellion after the Emperor's killed. And the story follows them, and they are the good guys of the story.
Is this episode 7 era?
It spans
Before
30
episode
years.
7?
But wasn't the Emperor evil?
This is an excellent question.
Not from her
Well, I mean,
perspective.
so Star Wars hasn't experimented with moral
From my
ambiguity.
perspective, the Jedi are evil.
Exactly. That is the only time Star Wars has ever previously experimented with moral ambiguity in the films.
If you can call it that.
Yeah, exactly. But so within the context of the story, it's like about, the experience of people who were very loyal to the Empire and believed in what the Empire stood for.
Is this why we're not allowed to have any more Jedis?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's a lie.
Order
isn't it?
66 means Order 66, as the
What
Emperor
does that
famously
mean?
decreed. Oh, God.
Shall we just?
let's-
I'll just not ask any more questions.
But one thing that was really that stood out to me about it is, so in the course of that single player campaign will begin immediately after the Battle of Endor and carry up all the way to the new movies, which is the 30-year span basically. And there will be like missions where you jump off to play as a different character, and the two that they confirmed were Luke Skywalker and Kylo Ren. So that kind of gives you the sense of the span of time it's going to cover.
So we're going to actually learn. Well, I mean, I guess
It'll-
Star Wars buffs might already know the story between those two movies.
Not to an extent, but so a lot of the new books and things that they're doing cover a bit of that period,
Yeah.
and this is sort of being threaded into that period, which
I'm
is kind of
excited for
rad.
this
Yeah,
now.
the trailer's good, and but one thing that's nice about it is, the protagonist, the hero, the Imperial hero of this story, is a woman, and one of the things that came out of Star Wars Celebration more broadly is how we talked a little bit last week when we were talking about this subject that EA actually have a pretty good track record on diversity in their games now, generally. And what impressed me out there is that actually that partnership with Lucasfilm makes a lot of sense, considering if I was to name or Disney more broadly, major entertainment producers, like big publishers of entertainment in any medium that are actually taking diversification of their stuff seriously, Lucasfilm would also be up there, because this was also the event where they announced their new sort of cartoon short range, which is all based on female protagonists. I've totally forgotten what it's called, because I think it has the phrase Destiny in the title, and I have 3 different Star Wars things that have Destiny in the title. I think so. So I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But they're doing these cartoon shorts, each one of which will be about Rey, one of which will be about Jyn Erso from Rogue One, one of which will be about Sabine from Star Wars Rebels, and all these different characters. And there's a new toy range around it, which are Star Wars action figures, but done in Barbie proportions. So they look like Barbies in terms of that, but they're not calling them dolls, they're calling them adventure figures, I think. But they're specifically aiming them at young women.
Sure.
Which obviously maybe makes sense from a marketing perspective. But one of the things that really struck me being at that event, and this struck me last year as well, but it's had a few years to set in now, and you maybe think of this by mentioning Mara Jade, who is one of the few female characters and few sort of active female heroes in Star Wars in the old expanded universe.
And she was the star of the Jedi Knight expansion pack.
She was.
Great.
Yeah. Mysteries of the Sith, I think. Is these shows show you immediately and very visibly the practical fact of why making those decisions is important. Because suddenly, because Star Wars Celebration, both years that I've been, it has been quite a diverse event by nerdy pop culture event standards, particularly because I'm used to the video game events. But, there are so many Rays and Jyn Ersos and Sabines running around. Still loads of Mara Jades as well, like in terms of costumes. Wow. One of the most poignant moments that I had at the event was watching the panel for the new movie, and during that panel they revealed Kelly Marie Tran's character in the new film, and I just happened to be stood in the crowd next to an Asian American woman who just burst into tears, like happily burst into tears, not in a bad way, and it was like, oh shit, and you suddenly see the how meaningful this is. So the fact that EA have a good track record, Lucasfilm have a good track record, and they are just putting another strong female protagonist into Star Wars in this way, and specifically also given that this is this year's EA shooter, right? This is Battlefield and Battlefront seem to be swapping in and out on each other's off years.
Interesting.
Like I haven't played any of the Battlefield single player campaigns, I think, ever. But I always thought, like, I quite enjoy some Call of Duty games, and I always thought if I was reviewing it, I'd probably sort of get something out of it. It'd be like decently entertaining. And so if you just switch that with Star Wars, I'm way more interested because it's sci-fi immediately.
Yeah.
And then also if it's a bad guy, that's immediately more interesting. As soon as you're on the bad side, even if it's sort of like a bad guy with a heart of gold type story, that's still way more interesting than...
Yeah, and actually the direction they seem to be taking it, and like I haven't seen more than it's in the trailer really, but is that they're not like, it's not, they're not waiting to become rebels. They're not like that kind of like, they'll realize halfway through the game that the Empire was bad. The setup is that, you are from a planet that willingly joined the Empire and benefited from it tremendously and really believes in it. And, I believe that they're going to address the fact that something like the Death Star is unambiguously bad. Like,
are we the baddies?
Yeah. But still, like, the trailer shows her, like, vowing to crush the rebellion and pointing a gun at Luke Skywalker. So there's not a lot of ambiguity there. So it's a genuinely interesting angle to take. I mean, there's a limit on which how Shades of Grey that can be, really. But yeah, I genuinely, I think it's promising. Like, I'm holding out. One thing they did say is that they're going to stop doing, there'll be some like of the power up stuff, but it won't be quite as arbitrary feeling as it was in Battlefront 1. It sounds like, and they were a bit woolly on this, it sounds like there'll be a resource system in multiplayer and you'll build up points and then you can cash in those points for things like being a hero character or being a vehicle rather than
be there at the right time.
Be there at the right time, get the right pickup, and you get to be Darth Vader for a bit.
Sure.
Which sounds promising. They also said specifically that the hero characters were going to be more physical and more grounded, which I think is shorthand for the fastest way to get across the map as Darth Vader will not be to do bounding leaps, as he is famous for doing in the movies.
Can it be for him to like call in an Imperial shuttle to fly him there?
Well, I don't know who I was talking to. I've had a lot of conversations about Star Wars over this weekend, as you might expect. But one of them was like, to do this right, Darth Vader should only be able to power walk at people. Like, so minor spoilers. Well, I guess no spoilers. So fast forward 30 seconds if you haven't seen Rogue One. But if Darth Vader ever ran, based on the last sequence in Rogue One, that whole trilogy wouldn't happen. You know what I mean? If he wasn't determined to power saunter down a corridor, lasering rebel soldiers.
Have you ever seen any of the America's Next Top Model things where they're all told to be their own wind machine, And if you walk aggressively enough forward, then your hair will like billow out in just the right way for a photo shoot.
Right.
Like that's Darth Vader.
Yeah, but with his cape, really. Yeah. Exactly.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, he wants to billow. He doesn't want to flap, so he doesn't want to go too fast.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Exactly. He's very style conscious, and like
you can tell by that sequence. I totally agree with you. Actually, he's doing it for the style points.
Also, the image of him like in sort of the icy battlefield of Hoth, like power walking across this vast expanse, and just imagine the camera panning out and like, okay, this is going to be a while.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is Vader always used to be either power walking down a corridor or having suddenly arrived at a door.
Yeah, exactly.
You can never see him get to somewhere.
Yeah, he can't really be a strategic asset in any kind of sensible way.
Or he breezes across a thing while like deflecting things casually with his lightsaber.
Yes, he can do that.
But
he doesn't run. I never considered this before. It's mad. But like when you see people running around as Darth Vader in Battlefront, yeah, it looks really weird. It makes him feel completely different, like this kind of sprightly. Yeah. I mean, obviously he's super powerful, but like he just doesn't run, does it?
They tried.
It's really
Stuff
unnatural.
or even stuff like the Emperor just being there at all.
Yeah, the Emperor shouldn't be a hero.
The Emperor's kind of jumping around.
Well,
That's just not what he does. He'd be fucking off watching it on TV.
He should be sat in a chair.
Phoning someone and
somewhere
being
on the map.
like,
And if you have to fight the Emperor, you have to
Yeah.
go to him.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like the series finale of season 4 of The West Wing, where Leo runs down a corridor, and you're like, Leo is running? Someone in The West Wing is running? What the fuck is going on? There's actual action in the show?
can't run and
for the
talk
first
at
time
the
in
same
100 hours? Exactly, there's no run and talk, it's walk and talk.
It's interesting, this decision, though, to go to the other side. You know, I'm assuming, you know, with Darth Vader and the Emperor dead, that there's no, like, do you not have any powers, any force powers then? Because that's very few Star Wars games, you never have force powers available.
No, that squad doesn't.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
interesting.
probably why they give you these hero missions as Luke
Well,
and Vader.
technically,
have.
there's a
sorry,
power
yeah.
vacuum, is there not?
I just mean in
Sith.
the single player of this new game, you know, it's going to be weird not having any force powers, I assume.
I think
gunplay.
they know they're making a shooter, partly. That's what they're making. So
I really liked the early missions of Jedi Knight when you
Before
didn't have,
you-
before you become a Jedi. I like it when you become a Jedi as well, but like, there's something kind of cool about just having like this blast pistol and a couple of thermal detonators and having to...
Yeah, and you really pay attention to the actual weapons, and it's like there's loads of variety in the Star Wars universe in terms of the different weapons, and it's actually a shame. You're so right about like, oh my god, so many blasters that just go pew and don't do anything especially interesting in current Star Wars Battlefront.
yeah. So I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I think the fact that it's a broader offering helps, for one thing, because it means that if you just enjoy one part of it, it doesn't feel like such a loss. They've been very coy about whether or not it will have the same sort of season pass structure, but it'd be interesting because they didn't do that with Titanfall 2 last year. They did do it with Battlefield. So EA are clearly somewhere in the tailoring the expensive offering to the game seems to be where they're going, which is sensible because they full on can kill games by picking the wrong business model for it. And I think Star Wars probably is big enough that the more generous you are, the more people will take from it. You know what I mean? The more people will get into it. And if they can sell cosmetic skins or something, then, you know, because they're already saying like, so actually this was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So you will never see a more welcoming audience for Star Wars than Star Wars Celebration. Those people will woo for anything, particularly in Star Wars Celebration in America. Like it was a very whoop happy audience. Sure. It was an extremely happy, like, and sitting in the huge arena for the reveal of Battlefront 2, you get, you know, the screams, like, you know, they announce the game, they show the trailer, they reveal that Darth Maul is in it, and like, not, people are screaming, people are on their feet cheering, there are lightsabers igniting everywhere, like, cause that's how people express that they're happy, and like, and, you know, it's a huge, huge thing, that it's not a crowd that is ever disappointed. There were a few moments during the weekend. One was when they announced that Star Wars Rebels will end with season 4. There was a kind of muted, like, and then one was when, right at the end of the movie panel, Rian Johnson, who's the director, said, "Oh, we've got one last thing to show you. It's an exclusive poster." And he was faking them out because, of course, there was a trailer, but he said there's an exclusive, and they all went, "Hooray!" on exclusive, and then actually, on poster, almost as one group of like 1,000 people. It was really sweet. But, you know, never hostile. Sometimes momentarily disappointed before they come around to it, but never like, ugh, until...
You could test them. You could just be like, and now we're going to settle in for our rewatch of the prequel trilogy.
You get a lot of cheers. That's the other thing.
Really?
Yes, well, I mean, the reason they're doing it for this new game is because while, like, my generation of fans loathe those films, and they are objectively bad films, a lot of...
And we're right.
Yeah, we're right to. A lot of kids came to Star Wars through those films.
I like the third one.
Revenge of the Sith.
I think so. There was a bouncy fight sequence, and
Yes.
Yoda was leaping around, and I thought that was quite exciting.
That's in...
I had a lot of sugared everything.
That's always I assumed
but
you would fight Pip.
popcorn, and it was me and my friend's like 8-year-old brother, and we were just having the time of our life.
That's
and
the way
then she
to-
was just like,
That's the way to watch the
Fine.
prequels while babysitting, I've found. Because little kids get something out of them that a sensible adult with taste never will.
So what was the other thing that they were...
So it was when they were like, and if you pre-order today, you'll get some exclusive skins and actual booze.
Wow.
Like a sea of booze from a crowd that had only ever been positive. And that was really interesting.
So that was what pre-ordering.
So if you pre-order, you get skins for Kylo Ren and Rey based on how they'll look in The Last Jedi rather than Force Awakens.
And so, because I know pre-ordering's been going through, various phases, and I actually, so it's the latest, even with Star Wars fans, that we don't like pre-ordering.
Because the funny thing about it was, there was like, and if you pre-order, you'll get exclusive stuff, and it was just like, oh no, we hate this. Yeah. And then they flashed up what the Last Jedi Kylo Ren skin is, which is obviously people's first look at what he will look like in that movie outside of the trailer. And there was like an ooh, like almost immediately. Like,
I do quite want that though.
Yeah. Oh, but the stuff is good.
Yeah. And so there is,
interesting.
But nonetheless, it was the only time I've ever seen them be hostile. So maybe EA will hopefully learn from this. Like, wow, if the friendliest audience on planet Earth hates this, then maybe it's time to
who is
come
it
up with
get?
an idea.
It's tough, that stuff, because, I every now and again, like, I saw this very kind of qualitative, I can't remember what it was. It was a video about DLC. I mean, that's something quite different to pre-ordering, I know, but and it was just asking random people at a convention what you kind of think about it. And some people were like, "Oh, boo! It should all be in the original game when it's released." And there was other people like, "It's like more game. It's awesome. We love this stuff. We're here at this convention because we love games." I mean, pre-ordering, I guess, it's kind of different. It's kind of just seen
I think there's some kind of business logistical reason why pre-orders are especially important to AAA companies or like shareholders and stuff. If it was me, I would just say, I think you avoid all of the negativity if you just say, if you pre-order or you buy during launch week, you get this. Because then you're not asking people to buy before reviews are out. You're just saying,
right.
Like,
it's the review thing,
we all do this, Steam encourages you to do a kind of a launch discount, and if you're doing pre-orders, then it's also a pre-order discount. Yep. But as long as you extend it to the week that people of launch as well, then it's not a sleazy thing. It doesn't just
feel like you're kind of like
you're not pressuring people to buy before.
Yeah. Although, just while we're to just go on the list of suggestions that I have made for Megaquarium.
Okay.
If you make any DLC, it should be DLSEA.
Can you spell?
See what I did there?
You're gonna have to cut out a little bit of that gap if you don't mind, just to make me not.
I might make it longer.
yeah.
Just add some tumbleweed sound
4 minutes of empty space.
That would be really funny, especially if I say that afterwards, which I have now said. But if you don't cut that out, it's weird. Anyway, I won't talk about cutting because I'm going to make the audience feel really weird. It's like, ooh, how much did we actually get to hear?
All of it. I'm very lazy.
5 minutes long when it goes out.
Man, I'm really slow. For the people at home, I spelt out C with my finger.
And then tried to look at the word
and then looked
in
at
the
it in
air.
space. That was weird. I feel a bit strange now. I'm quite embarrassed.
It's okay. I don't think I helped at all.
You know what? I think I was ready for some real hard-hitting business thing. Like, if you do DLC though, make sure you do it like this, because otherwise it's not cool.
Not offering
and it was just
no,
just here's a pun.
It was a cheap
that I would like you to.
Yeah, I didn't help in any way. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, to finish up on Battlefront, I would say that I left feeling kind of cautiously excited for it, but that should be tempered by the fact that I left that event essentially only wanting to look at Star Wars objects for the rest of my life, because it does refresh my enduring love.
You went in thinking that.
Yes, I did. And it always refreshes my, enthusiasm
Sleeping
for that thing.
refreshes your enthusiasm for stuff.
Yeah, I get tired. But yeah, it gave me all sorts of thoughts about why that. One thing I think it helps me do is justify this whole mad thing in my life, which is something I maybe desperately need or don't need. Maybe it's even bad for me to do a 180 on that idea, to be surrounded by people who share that enthusiasm and kind of get something out of it.
It's just nice for you not to be surrounded by, for example, a person who will ask you all kinds of questions that you either can't answer or that are stupid.
Mm.
So
yeah,
the sunk cost fallacy convention.
Yeah, pretty much. There's a lot of different ways of looking at it. I think there's
You bought a Star Wars card game just to take with you to Star Wars.
Yes. And I got a lot of mileage out of it, you'd be surprised to find out.
But you played the ones that they had there.
And mine.
Oh.
I just played both. Sometimes we were in the hotel. Sometimes we were in the airport. Sometimes we were in the press room and we didn't want to go queue. There was a lot of reasons to buy Star Wars things and bring Star Wars things to the Star Wars thing where you bought Star Wars things.
Anyway.
Yeah. you know what? Pop culture brings people together, and that's nice. I like that. I like it a
Me,
lot.
the bad guy.
I do love me
I
some
want
Star Wars.
to add, turning to my obsession, just because someone pointed out, there is a jog and talk scene in the West Wing before the end of season 4. I know someone's going to point it out. I just wanted to make sure everyone knows I know that.
Getting out ahead of them.
This is my nerddom.
Yeah. I've never seen all the West
My
Wing.
equivalent.
Just
We
dipping
could
in
watch it if you'd like.
Sure.
You should watch it and also listen to the West Wing Weekly podcast.
Okay.
People sometimes
This is
ask
the
us
thing.
for
Don't
podcast
try and sell me
recommendations.
too much TV at once because I struggle to get through TV. People recommend me as much as it is. I could be watching Star Wars.
I've watched all The Good Wife. The Good Wife is very good.
You will seem to enjoy The Good
The
Wife.
most recent season, I kind of tapped out because I was
Really?
like, I can't.
I like the
can't imagine
dreamy
that.
new guy.
Hang on, don't spoil it.
Sorry.
I'm not sure. I'm always watching whatever comes on
There's a
Netflix
dreamy
in the
man,
UK. So I think I'm a season behind.
Okay. Well, my lips are sealed.
When you are fully up to date, let me know because then we can reconvene the Good
Yes.
Wife appreciation / criticism.
That
club.
would be excellent.
The good thing actually about the West Wing Weekly podcast is that it is by fans of the West Wing, including Josh Molina, who's on the West Wing, but also it doesn't go easy on criticism of the West Wing, and like when the West Wing is sexist, it points it out, and
That's cool.
that's that kind of like. It's really cathartic because when you're watching it, you're like, this is so good, but it's so fucking annoying about that one scene.
And when they
it's
mention
really
it, you're like,
all you need is
yes.
just hear some people say, yeah, that was bullshit. And you're like,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
okay.
There are a few, because we're in the middle of, for me, rewatching for the umpteenth time for Chris, the first ever watch through of the X-Files. And so we're on season 7 now, and there have been several moments throughout the course of all of the seasons where I've just been like, yes, I know about some of the dodgy treatment of, particular cultures or
Yeah.
just, oh god, I'd forgotten.
To be
this
fair,
part
all of
before.
the world's cultures and religions are granted the privilege of a slightly insensitive X-Wing mystery. X-Wing shit.
I think nothing for you has ever eclipsed the second episode, though, where Mulder just draws tits on a Yeti.
That is my favourite thing that happens in the X-Files. And so essentially, the twist at the end of the show, they think there's basically a Sasquatch
Sorry,
killing
spoilers,
hikers, right?
but,
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
But
like the
they
second
can't,
episode.
they can't figure out its behaviour until Mulder, who will always come up with the magic solution to the problem right at the end of the episode, twigs that it's a female Yeti or a female Sasquatch and that it's protecting its young or scavenging for its young or something. And that's the twist. However, he figures this out by literally looking at a picture of a Yeti and then basically just drawing boobs on it. And that's my favourite. It might be my favourite thing on television.
But
like-
so it's mildly serious, or it's like,
yeah, it's not-
pretty
it's
much
not, like-
completely
Plot point.
serious.
It is,
It's like,
yeah.
but look, I've solved the puzzle.
Yeah.
I'm drawing boobs in front of for the people at home.
Yeah.
I'm doing more finger drawing. Apparently, really, I'm a visual kind of person. Apparently,
That's my favourite episode of the X-Wings. Actually, the X-Wing would be the cross between the X-Files and the West Wing. So that's why.
Oh, and you did really
circle.
like the virtual reality one.
The virtual
from
reality
other
one
day.
is, honest to God, terrible.
Yeah, it's so bad.
It's really bad.
a
But
great idea.
So good.
yes,
I
also
need to
amazing.
go back and watch every program that has virtual reality in now, and it would just be like, oh,
There's an
this is what
episode,
we used to
She
think
Wrote.
it'd be like.
Oh yeah, Murder She Wrote, but also Space Precinct has like VR in it, and so I spent part of my week last week just making GIFs so that we can use them when we write about VR.
That's
In the
amazing.
future is just
I have a stockpile.
Anytime you can get around using like the 3 photos of people wearing VR headsets that are out there.
oh god. Yeah. Alice is a big fan of Scully in VR.
That episode is so fucking stupid. I just remembered it again. I only saw it last week. But yeah. So I just realized there is something else I've been playing. And I want to, the reason it didn't occur to me is because I'm not sure about I mean, Tom, you know how to do this because you work on games, but like the ethics.
I just talk about it shamelessly. I don't even have any kind of disclosure.
We talked about my game for about 20 minutes.
Fair enough. So I'm working on a game now, which I've also been playing a bunch of because I now work on it, and that's a necessary component of understanding what the fuck you're doing. So this has been in the pipes for a little while, but as of last week, I'm now working a lot on HackMud, which is been out since last September. It's Sean Gubelman's text-based hacking MMO. It's a MUD, and you hack in it. HackMud.
Mud being multi-user dungeon.
Yeah. And so I am doing, I guess, all of the writing for it now and a bunch of design.
Awesome.
For puzzles and things. It's a hacking MMO where, but that begins with a pretty substantial, probably 3 to 6 hour single player component that will teach you about hacking by writing scripts. It's a programming game. Essentially, you will learn to program. It is about the logic of programming and fundamentally about, intuiting language and relatively realistic hacking by video game standards. It's not play a game of Pipe Dream to access a computer system. It's figure out what someone's password might be through intelligent reading of dialogue. And that's a simple thing, but beyond that, it might be, cracking a QR code and things like that using your actual phone and that kind of thing. And
I haven't played it yet, but I talked to Sean about it, and he said it's just JavaScript, like the language you're writing.
Pretty much, yeah, it's JavaScript. Yeah, you eventually, so you play the single player thing, which teaches you a lot of the game's vocabulary, which I really enjoyed. So before I was working on the game, I played through that, and I genuinely enjoyed it. Then when you leave that, it sort of deposits you in what is then the MMO, which is the multiplayer aspect of it. And functionally, the mechanics of the game are to go out into the world and hack. It's set on the internet, obviously, but in a future where all the humans have vanished. And why and how is less ambiguous, and that's some of the world building work that I'll be doing and that kind of thing. But, the internet is gone, but the humans are gone, but the internet is populated by AI and consciousnesses that are in some cases just AI that exist, and in some cases the sort of the remaining consciousnesses of the Internet of Things. So trains that have intelligence and that kind of thing. And they're hanging out now in this space. And so there are a million, so the fiction goes, corporations and things out there who have user accounts that are just left over, and those user accounts will have resources in them. And so the kind of the PvE, the going out and killing monsters equivalent, if it was an MMO, is to go out and find a corporation that hasn't been hacked yet. Because none of this stuff is instanced. It refreshes after a certain interval. And crack into an account and get some money that you can use to add new stuff to your account, buy new scripts and things you can run. However, it is, because it's a programming game, it has very deep internal logic. You can also write your own JavaScript and upload it as programs that you can then sell to other players. So the basic unit of things is that you might, if you were, it's not interesting how this is shaken out, but you might write a script that will scan for and hack accounts for other players and give them 90% of the money, but take 10% for the person who wrote the script. And that's how they make money then. And that's how the economy works. It's sort of Eve-like in its complexity. It's also Eve-like in its difficulty curve, which is one of the things that I'm working on, hopefully. Or at least in terms of trying to soften that a little bit, without taking away from the complexity of the game. But also, all that logic also applies to players. So if you run a script that isn't secure, it might say it does one thing, but there's no reason to know that. And it might just dump all your money or dump all your money into someone else's account or...
Yeah, so Sean was saying it has like security zones the same way Eve does, where security 1.0, you can run scripts where what they can do to other players is basically send them a message and like send text to them.
Yeah.
And then, I can't remember what the rating was, but the next security level down...
It's full sec down to null sec.
Okay.
So.
And then the next one down, you can edit players' money, which to me seems like that would be 0 sec. In my game, that's the worst it can get. It's like, you can just take money from them and give money to them. And then the next one down is like, you can change the character's skills and like they're hardwired, like just delete them or replace them and give them new things. And then 0 is you can just crash their game. Just make it not work anymore.
And it's pretty brutal, but the way you can get around this is there's a way to look at which scripts are, so there is a certain set of scripts that are always going to work. And they're called the trust scripts because they're run by an AI called Trust, which is one of the kind of it's the major NPC in the game, really.
Definitely going to turn out to be a traitor.
And one of them is called, sort of like, it allows you to check the security level of any script, and it is always right. So if you type in, like, if you run the command to get the security level of a particular script, either that's player made or generated by the game, it will tell you what security level it is. And that is also not impossible to fake, but you can't do certain things and have your script appear to be high security. Yeah. So players have to find, if they want to fuck people over, they have to find very creative ways to trick someone into running a script without looking at the security level. And often if you just give someone a script, the first thing, and so, you know, the first advice you should give to a newcomer is always check. Always check. But I've been got by it like a couple of times now, and it, you know, I lost all my money a couple of times, lost all my upgrades a couple of times, and the ways it happens is like someone has created a fake corporation that looks exactly like the corporations that the NPCs generate. It's the wording is the same. They've borrowed loads of the vocabulary. They've done loads of stuff. And when you hack those systems, it will spit out a list of accounts that might be lootable if you can get into them. This, and those are randomly generated, this spits out a fixed list of accounts, and one of them happens to be this trap script. And because you're used to entering those account names in a different context, you don't realize that what you're running is a script that I think doesn't just take away all your money, it also broadcasts your lock, which is your like actual account location, which allows you to then be hacked directly rather than have to run a script to do it. So it's genius, but it's also fucking evil. So yeah, so that's what I'm working on. But like, so
wow,
like I know
I was so judgy when you told me that you'd been caught out by this.
I know you. You seem genuinely disappointed in me.
Well, I was really sad because I was like, oh no, someone's picking on you, and then you explained how it had happened, and then it instantly flipped into how could you be so careless?
Yeah, some of them are really simple. Like you'll get something that's just like it'll be called something like so the NPC accounts come in tiers, and it'll be like free tier 1 hack. .exe or whatever, you know, function thing. And you run that and you go, sorry, this version's out of date. Run free tier 1 hack. And so if you run check level on that, it'll be like, oh, this is the highest level. It just sends you a message. And then it's just, the message is, oh, this one's out of date. Run this one. Yeah, and then if you don't check the second one, that's the one that gets you. Like, and there, you know, I think there are things that Sean would like to do to make the game about. The game is about multiple things other than that. There is a lot of fiction hidden away in the game. There are a lot of things you can find. And there'll be more. And there is more now, in fact, that people haven't found yet. Because I've written it and hidden it. But, it's a lot about, you know, my job on this game is a lot about sort of like digging people's gardens up at night and hiding things in it and burying it and hoping they find it at some point in the future.
Like a JavaScript Easter bunny.
Yes. Actually, yeah, a lot. Yeah.
So how much creative power do normal players have? Can they create their own, areas and...
Functionally, yeah. So it's an entirely a text-based game, right?
Sure.
So, you know, but you can create anything you can create with ASCII art functionally. So someone, okay. I mean, a player, one of the most prominent players has created something called Haunty Mall, which is a game about picking 3 doors in a mall, and it's all represented with ASCII sort of like, you know, adventure art. And you run the script to pick a door, and it's randomly generated. And if you pick the right door and it doesn't have a ghost behind it, he will wire you 1.5 million credits. And this is genuine, and that is just completely created by the community. Yeah. But that is then something that people get sent as like, if you want some money day one and you're struggling, just try this a few times. You get locked out of it. You can only play it once a day, but every now and then you might get a windfall that you'll then lose the next time you get duped by someone else.
So I think I misunderstood a little bit. So, cause I'm used to kind of like, fantasy mud type things and you're kind of traipsing through a dungeon or whatever. Yeah. But this, I guess everything can be done with a script, right?
Yeah.
Have I got this right? So like when there you'd have like, you know, make an area. So it's like move north to go to this area. I guess you can actually just fake it with a script. Like, is that right? Have I got my head around this?
So your interaction with the game is you have a computer terminal.
Yep.
And you are just on the internet.
Yes.
In this, and so, you know, you can run scripts and get access to accounts that might be you navigate in a particular way. So the example would be you'd run the script to access a company, and that might
what does it actually look like on the screen? Is it like a DOS prompt?
Yeah, like a big DOS prompt on the left, and then you've got panels on the right that have some other things, including your chat channel. Sure. Even sending a chat message is a script command. Where you specify whether everything is done with essentially a 2-part sort of script format. And then in curly brackets, a set of variables.
Yeah.
So if you're sending a private message to another player, it's like chat.send curly brackets user equals this person, message equals this person, close curly brackets.
Yeah, yeah.
If you are interacting with the corporate account, it's corporate dot, you know, reception, curly brackets, user equals this, password equals that. And then it might tell you wrong password, but give you some information that tells you what the password might be or gives you some way to get it. Which might...
It's good security.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, you know, it's pretty low security in terms of, realistic hack. It's sort of realistic to the extent that you're not playing Pipe Dream, which is probably my go-to example.
Yeah.
But like, there is a logic to, they are puzzles at the end of the day, the hacking puzzles. So you might be given a limited amount of time to, brute force a password which is going to be 3 different colors. And there's a limited list of colors and there's 3 things it can be. And so you have to kind of try brute force them within the time limit, which also makes it sort of a typing challenge as well. But
can you write a script to kind of just, input them in all different, wow.
And then you can sell that to the players. Yeah, that's the idea. Cool. So
I think it's very cool. So have you guys played Uplink?
Yes.
Introversion's Uplink ages ago, right? And I love that game. I love the theme of it and I love so much of the world, but the actual, you don't get to do any of the script writing. And that was always what disappointed me. So you buy a brute force password cracker, but you don't write the cracker. You just buy that and then you put it into practice. And I always loved the idea. I wish I could go in and make something more efficient by tweaking it, And this sounds like the closest thing to a real hacking game. Yeah. Apart from real hacking, which, we don't really want to do because it's kind of bad, right?
Yeah. I was asking Sean, presumably, I was like, can you get another user's password? And he was saying, no, he uses Steam for the authentication.
That's
and none of that stuff, he says, just can't put anything on his server because literally everything he puts on his server, anyone can access. There's no actual security, because it's literally a game about hacking and doesn't stop you from accessing anything.
So I think approaching it as a critic, because it's been out for a while. It's been out since September. It has an active player base, which has been really nice for me because it means it's stuff that so a lot of the time,
it's quite unusual to sort of come on as a writer after the game is out.
Yeah, it's actually kind of like the perfect gig in some ways because I'm really grateful to Sean for taking me on to this because it's been really cool. But so some of the stuff I'm doing is some bigger stuff that's coming further down the road. But the other stuff is if someone's written a script, for example, to brute force a particular keyword, they probably rely on the fact that there is a limited list of things the game draws on when it's generating those puzzles. So some of the work that I'm doing is just expanding all of those lists because then it immediately creates hashtag content for all of the people so everyone who's still an active player has to then update their crackers and things to account for all the new information that's in the system. Everyone who's not, their stuff stops working as well, which is a way to, because if someone creates a script that hacks all accounts of a certain tier and then leaves the game, that money that they're getting when anyone runs that, if that's the way it works, is just going into basically a dead account, which could be hacked, which would be really interesting. Because if you could get that could be potentially one of the most valuable accounts in the game to get. But it's tricky, right? Yeah. But then that software starts to become obsolete because it's not accounting for the information. So part of it is just feeding new stuff into the game.
Maybe if someone's made a really popular script, you want to harass them until they hate the game enough to leave. So that you can
Life hacks, they call that.
Can you be hacked passively? So is the only way to hack another player by getting them to tricking them? Or what's the password on someone's own money?
So if you, there are 2 things you would need. If you have to have spent enough money to upgrade your account to a certain level where you can be hacked, which is almost like a way of, it's almost like you have to have leveled up enough to do PvP is basically the way to think about it. Yeah. But also that person can't do it with just your username. They need what's called your lock, which is like a randomly generated string that goes after your username. However, one of those low security things that a bad script can do to you is make you broadcast your lock. So you can add, you could add a bad script that makes you DM the person who tricked you with your actual lock, which then they could sell. Or they can do the shitty thing and make you publish it to the chat channel in the game, the main chat channel that everyone joins.
Everyone's got it.
Yeah.
Can you refresh and get a new lock and... That's it. So that's it. Everyone can get their money forever
because you can have multiple accounts.
Right. Sure.
And this is one of the game's mad logic things: is there can be multiple use.
Yes. Okay.
And that's one of the ways to trick people as well, right? You can be.
Do you have to buy the game again to have a new account?
No. It's part of it's tied to your account. So when you start the game, you have access to 2. You can make 2 users. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I think it's super hardcore. So what I'd say about it, I approached it initially as a critic when I was interested in it, and I'd known Sean for a while, but. I think what he's done with the single player portion of the game that teaches you its systems is very good. It's hard, but it gives you you got time to get through it. And by the time you leave it, you will understand how to do a little bit of programming and how the scripts work and things like that. You also fundamentally know by that point if the game is for you or not.
Yeah.
There is a pretty big difficulty spike when it comes into sort of making money and finding your way in the single player. It's something that I'm interested in getting involved in trying to ease, cause I think obviously I think, Sean's made a super interesting game, and the reason it's super interesting is because, it's got this potential depth and there's this real risk involved in things. But I'm interested in finding new ways for people to get into that, basically, for people to learn what they can do in ways that aren't just, try a bunch of things, get conned a bunch of times, and maybe, maybe fall out with it. So that's the sort of the direction of my work on it. But it's a real interesting thing. And it's been really cool to...
Don't make it so that he stops making the fish game.
No. Pip's been looking increasingly concerned as Tim's been looking increasingly interested.
I just haven't played a game about programming, like a game where my skills as a programmer could be useful. What?
This is why there are so many games that are like about programming, not so much in this style, but like the sort of like teaching you programming type ones, or all of Zachtronic's stuff is all like very programming oriented. It's because everyone who's making games is a programmer.
Like, what if this was
I know
fun?
what interests me.
yeah. And therefore must interest everybody else.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, it's weird because I'd never been in a situation before where I can't say, like, overall, get it, or whatever, because, literally, I'm working on it now. I think it's super interesting. I know that Sean's got plans for it. So, that's what I'm doing now. Snacking game.
Should we do questions from questions?
That's not how I told you to say it, Pip.
Well, yes, but then you
Didn't we say
delegated,
not like that?
so if you'd wanted it done your way, you should have done it.
Very well. We'll go with this then.
Would you like to pull some questions from the question sack, which might be full of bees?
That's also not how I asked you to say it, but I appreciate the extra effort you put in this way around, so let's go with it.
An antagonistic
it's a
start
bee.
to questions.
Sucks to be you.
Sucks to be.
Questions.
And you killed a bee.
Another smooth beginning from questions from questions.
If you will be a jerk.
I'm sorry.
You're not, but let's do a question.
Okay. So this first question is genuinely sad. Like, there's no jokes about this. This is a genuinely sad thing, but I think leading to a worthy question. It's been sent to us by James, who writes, hello, Super Crate Box and Crow's Bar. In brackets, forgive me, I tried, but that's
good.
Pretty good. Yeah, that's good.
One's a game, one's a developer.
Yep. First of all, thank you guys for the wonderful entertainment you provide. The pod helps me get through most of my workday. As a student and prospective maker of games, you're all a big inspiration to me. That's very kind to say. And then he goes on to say, my 19-year-old dog Sally just died. It was very sudden and unexpected, even considering her great age. She was in remarkably good health. She drowned in the backyard pool of my parents' house while out to go potty one night. The fact that I literally saw her the day before while visiting for Easter, and the knowledge that she had such a terrifying, painful death made the shock and hurt even worse. I'm only 21 years old, so I don't really have any memories of life without her in it. And now finding interactive activities that require much thought and presence on my part are hard to enjoy, and I've been settling for TV shows. However, most of the shows I watch are ones that I wait to view with my girlfriend rather than watching alone. Without games, there's a lot of time for idle and painful thoughts. Have any of you ever had similar experiences that led to struggle with games? Are there any games you associate with the recovery process or grieving that have made you feel better? Any recommendations? Preferably non-prominently featuring dogs. Thanks so much. James. So, I mean, obviously this is, I think the line here is that, like, James is full on grieving. Like, grief is its own thing. I think games can help in some ways, but I also get what he's saying about grieving too much to really commit to a difficult interactive process.
Yeah. The older I get, the more I appreciate games as just a way to just not be in your life for a while. Like, it's just that there are so many times, from the really trivial to the really serious, where you just want to be somewhere else. And, I've used them just to get through like a brief period of illness or like being in pain for a while. And the thing that it all hinges on, I think, is his thing about that he's finding games that require too much of his brain are not working for him. So I don't know how extreme that condition is. For me, last time I was really, really ill, I played Wolfenstein New Order, which is optionally a stealth game, and I played it as a stealth game, and I found any kind of stealth game really worked for me because it completely consumed my brain. I didn't have room to think about anything else because it's tense. Like, you're just all the time, even when nothing's happening, you're tense, you're worrying about like stuff. And so I don't know if that would be too much for him. I also found Dragon Age Inquisition got me through like a really, really bad hangover, which is trivial compared to this. But that I felt was more low engagement. Like I wasn't tense all the time. It was actually kind of relaxing and didn't really require that much of me. There's narrative stuff going on that is complex, but you don't have to worry about it. And you can just sit there and kind of like coast through a bunch of side quests. And it's addictive, it's compelling, and it will hopefully occupy you.
Yeah, I'd say that there are two sides to this for me, because like I relate to the experience of being sad for one reason or another and not really clicking with games for that time. I think the two things I would suggest, one is, we've talked about it plenty of times in this podcast, but sort of grand strategy games and 4X games that, Sid Meier would describe as a series of interesting decisions, really, like make a decision on a turn, do the next thing. I always think they're a good fit for this kind of, because sometimes all you need to do is sort of pass time while you feel better, while whatever it is heals. And they're an amazing way of passing time, and they require input and they require thought, but they don't require, you don't have to be on your best day. You don't have to be having your best reactions or making the best decisions straight away. You just need to make some decisions and then sort of play through the consequences of them. So for me, that sort of, at the moment, when I dip into the games like that, it tends to be either Total War, Warhammer, or Stellaris, both of which might be a decent fit for something like this. The other side to it is that I think social like play, playing with other people can be helpful just to kind of get you out of your own head and kind of encourage you to do other things. And so this might be a good time to look into MMOs. Like obviously if you're a student and you've got limited time, then that's maybe not a perfect thing. But, your average, fantasy dungeon crawlery kind of MMO game is going to be relatively low engagement to the point of being maybe a little bit grindy, a little bit Dragon Age Inquisition. I mean, the criticism that was thrown at that game was that it was too much like an MMO. Sort of go off and do some things in the open world and maybe interact with some other people. If you have friends that play an MMO, join them, that kind of thing. Because also being around other people, even if you're not talking about the things that are bothering you, is healthy. So those would be my suggestions. I don't know if anyone else has anything.
I mean, I'll just add one more to that. And so I like JRPGs or like Final Fantasy specifically, just because those, especially the Final Fantasy games, are just the later ones are so linear that you're kind of just on a story. It's you mentioned that you're kind of watching more TV than playing games at the moment, and so those sort of games which are just like an interactive story, and especially JRPGs which are just sometimes just keep pressing A, to progress. And actually, yeah, those I think can be kind of really relaxing and, a good one for this sort of time.
Well, I hope everything gets better soon, basically. Cause that's, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to lose a childhood pet and yeah.
I was just going to say, maybe some more casual games, like maybe even mobile games, but I don't know how good a piece of advice that is, because it can they're the kind of games where you get to have that null space and it doesn't ask much of you and you can maybe pass time with them and it gives you something to do, but it can also become a really unhealthy thing. And I don't know how much I'm willing to unguardedly recommend that stuff, because it's stuff that, I mean, obviously grieving and depression are very different, but ongoing battle with depression, which is all kinds of fun and games, but the things that I've used in a kind of entertainment self-medication way have hindered as much as they've helped. So things like Dots or things like Candy Crush have been valuable, but then have maybe tipped over into obsessive time passing that isn't helpful. Or getting really into Dota was really good because it meant that I had friends on Skype that I didn't necessarily need to talk to, because they would talk to each other to organize strategies or whatever. But at the same time, I found after a while that it was fake socializing. Like I wasn't interacting. I was just sort of eavesdropping, and it wasn't helping. So I don't really know where I'm going with that, but just as a kind of maybe keep an eye on it and look into things, maybe just some online help sheets, something on, I don't know, like I think the NHS might have something, Samaritans might have something that will point you in directions of things that might be helpful if you notice that it's not just that you need time to heal from a thing, it's that it's actually, it isn't as, not straightforward, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you maybe need to reach out a bit more. Or...
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it is worth pointing out that games aren't necessarily the solution.
Mm.
But in any case, I do hope that games feels better soon.
Mm.
Moving on to the next question, Peter writes, if you could lift one idea or mechanic from Breath of the Wild into the next open world PC game you play, what would it be? So this will be a relatively quick one because I think I'm the only person who played a lot of Breath of the Wild. And that game's amazing. As I keep hinting at, I'd really like to do a standalone podcast on it. Something that I would pull out that I did talk about in the article about the game for Eurogamer, but is I love the way it takes the issue of an open world game's manageability and solves it, but without devolving into a kind of Ubisoft-style minimap full of icons in the way that most open worlds do. So most open world games make themselves accessible to you by saying, go here and you will learn everything there is to do in an area. And we'll break those down into activity types that will each have their own icon. Far Cry is a good example of this. Assassin's Creed is an example of this. Here is an outpost. Here is a tower. Here is this thing to conquer. Here is a hunting challenge, whatever it is. I think this has the effect of making a big world feel both incredibly busy and incredibly small, because it is ultimately comprised of repetitive tasks. And by the time you've done one of each of them, you've played the entire game, just not in terms of quality, not in terms of quantity. One thing Breath of the Wild does really, really well is it has towers that you can climb, and climbing each tower is a challenge, but each one is useful to you for two reasons. One, it's a teleport point, so it allows you to fast travel to somewhere, which is just a basic good, and something we'll probably come back to later in this episode. The other is that it's a literal vantage point. It's useful because it's very high up, and you have a telescope, and a lot of that game basically silently communicates everything that's going to be interesting to you. It doesn't have minimap icons for things. It lets you set your own waypoints, which are all coloured, and then appear in the world as like a kind of coloured beam of light from the sky. But they can be on anything. And the way the world is designed, each of those towers gives you sight lines to stuff that you will want to investigate. And it's not as digital as here is an icon that says a boss is here. You'll be looking at from one tower and you will see something move in the mist in the distance, and then it'll move again and you'll realize it's a massive, bigger than you can kind of imagine based on what you've seen so far, creature kind of walking around in the desert kilometers from where you are. And that's what makes you want to go and explore that area. And on the way to trying to find that, you discover that there are things you need to be able to navigate that environment. And the whole thing retains a sense of actual discovery. You feel like you found it, in some cases, maybe by accident. And then there are simple, more digital versions of that, you have shrines, which is super important, because each shrine is a puzzle, and the puzzles are amazing, and they use the controls in really interesting ways, and they're all completely different. But they're a standard element. The entrance to a shrine is a standard element. It's just what's in the shrine that's different. And you want to do them because that's how you upgrade your health bar and your stamina bar and stuff. But each shrine is a cave that is lit up with orange runes around its entryway when you haven't done it yet, and those runes turn blue when you've solved it. And that means that from a vantage point like a mountaintop or a tower, a scan of the environment, those orange lights will jump out at you, and then you can place your waypoints on them if that's what you want to focus on. Or if you see a town, you can choose that instead. But at no point does it tell you definitively these are all of the things in this area for you to do. It just lets you see them and place your own objectives. And that game is so much about setting your own priority and having that respected, that works. I mean, the reason that it's so impressive as a game, I think, is because unlike the vast majority of open world games, there is something everywhere, and there is an astonishing amount of stuff in that game. And most of it is bespoke. Most of it is made by a designer who has placed some secret or some new mechanic you've never seen before, or some mini game or something somewhere. And so you are reliably rewarded for just going in a direction and seeing what you find, or looking up from a mountaintop and thinking, that looks like a hedge maze over there. I'm going to see what that is. And it turns out it is. And there's an NPC there and they can tell you something, and that'll lead you to a reward. And that is amazing. And it takes a level of investment that the vast majority of open world game makers don't make. because at some point they go, this is the bit we template out.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Oh, yes. It is amazing.
Does the person at the center just say, like, don't stand in a maze? It sucks. It's really hard to find your way out.
Sometimes. It's genuinely funny, Zelda as well. Genuinely funny. But yeah, so I don't want to get into so I suppose like my one thing I wish they would take can't be make an amazing game, but I'd specifically
Make a maze though.
Yeah, I'd specifically like more developers to trust the player to find their own fun rather than create a to-do list. Like Breath of the Wild is the first open world game I've played where at no point have I felt like I had a to-do list.
It's very confident design by the developers. I'm like, I really admire that. I've not had a chance to play it yet. I need to buy a Switch.
They're really good. I'm really impressed with ours. I forget that it's a handheld. I remember being on a press trip a little while ago and having a lot of hours to kill in an afternoon, and my friend pulling out a Switch from his bag and continuing to play Zelda, and I'd completely forgotten you could do that.
Yeah, right. Anyway, we probably shouldn't talk about.
But anyway, I'd love to do a podcast on that game because I genuinely think I would be amazed if there was a better game this year. But nonetheless,
Heat signature.
yeah. By all means, if you want to add the ability to strap a little squidly balloon to a log and float it over.
Oh, that's already in there.
You more than anything else, you should play Breath of the Wild because it is probably the only Nintendo game that's had Tom Francis written all over it that I've ever seen.
Funny enough, it will probably be my reward when Heat Signature's out instead of buy a Switch. And
that's probably the way around to do it.
If it does well.
So next is John Roberts, but not that John Roberts. Or that John, or that Roberts. Who writes, if you could choose one group of things, for example, car parks, churches, bathrooms, etc., as your fast travel points in real life, what would they be?
Coffee shop. Because
Starbucks.
I'm lazy.
It would be the office that my friend works at because I go down most weeks and play Netrunner there. And
nice.
It's one of the main things I leave the house for.
Shit.
Yeah, because I work from home.
If you could choose, because I guess we're choosing a type of place.
Oh, right, okay.
So, you know what I mean? Like, as you can put...
If there's only one of those, you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I suppose it depends how much you want to sort of encourage yourself to explore as well, which is interesting because, you know, you could pick something which is essentially designed around that, for example, bus stops, because that's, you know, like a thing that is paced around where people might want to stop, but, you know, with enough space between them that it's not a problem for actually, you know, just bespokeness of, you know, the journey and whatever.
I would like to pick water features.
Nice.
So that everywhere I go is kind of pretty.
I mean, I could just go kettles and then that would be literally anywhere in the UK, but not
Isn't that
anywhere in America.
People could fast travel to your kitchen though. That would be kind of scary.
That's true.
Isn't that kind of how it works in Harry Potter?
Is it only for me, or is it for them as well?
It says your, so I assume it's just for you.
I'm kind of... did he suggest...
In Harry Potter...
I can't remember who it was. Suggest... Like toilets. Did I read that
Toilets
right?
is a really good one.
But
there's a lot of them.
But I don't want to appear in a toilet, like in a public toilet in like a pub or something.
Well, that's
and
being
like
used.
People around, you know.
Well, yeah,
Can you preview the location?
Cubicles, empty cubicles with like, and like it blocks you until like it's vacant. Would be okay.
Yeah, right. I mean, toilets are a good one. I think, because I think mine would probably be independent tabletop game shops would be a good one for me because the only thing in real life that's made me regret
but not for
that
your bank account.
Well, let's not start worrying about that now. The
vaults and banks.
That'd be really bad because you couldn't get out
to other vaults.
Yeah.
But you'd be rich beyond the wildest dreams. You'd be like that guy in Dishonored 2 at the start.
If one of these vaults has a shop in it, we'll buy everything in that shop.
That shopkeeper would be like, yes. At last! For God's sake, you would think this would be a prime location.
He shops in a vault. He already has all the money. He needs something to ride.
It's a money shop.
Take the money.
That is so video games. Where like a person who's like, I desperately need lithium, and there's a pile of lithium in front of them. Like, I'll pick up this lithium and sell it to you then.
I would go with that simply because the only thing in life that has made me regret that I don't drive has been the need to transport tiny plastic people and spaceships to places.
If we're going to do that, I mean,
Aquaria
National Trust properties and, national parks would be mine, because they tend to be a bit of a pain to get to without a car. Yeah. So, it's like for example, get to, I don't know, like the Mendips or something, which is actually quite near us. It's, you have to get like 4 million buses and then walk. And you're like, well, I mean... Okay.
This wouldn't be that useful, but just thematically, it would be cool if it was the triangulation points at the top of hills. I think those might be fast travel tokens for somebody. Like, not me, but somebody can use those. They just touch one and they can go to any other.
Yeah. I didn't know those existed.
Because they have, they have
clearly.
Line of sight to each other, so...
Youth hostels might be a good one.
I don't know, I'm not a youth anymore.
No.
They
not
chase
allowed
you
in.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Anywhere I want to go to, but that's probably not useful.
No, it's not. I don't think that's a valid category.
No, in that case, yeah, I'm just going to go with like that whole kind of very middle class, possibly hosting a fate kind of location.
You can teleport between any Waitrose on the planet.
God. Any village fate. I'd be happy.
Okay.
It's got a tombola, I'm in.
Wherever there's a raffle.
Yeah.
Pip may be summoned.
Hook a duck.
Beg your pardon?
Does no one else know what that is?
You grew up in a small village, Pip, that's all I'll say.
You don't know what hook a duck is?
No.
Really?
Are you hearing the other sense of it?
Are you guys trolling me?
Yeah.
Like, they're those yellow
I can imagine
floaty
what it is in the sense that you mean it.
pool, and you have like a stick with a hook on them, and they've all got like a little curtain ring kind of jammed in their head.
I'm down. It's cool.
And then if you pick the right one, underneath it's got a thing, and you get a prize.
It's pretty sweet.
Hook a duck.
In any sufficiently large city, you go to a local pond, you'll find a hook a duck.
Does that sound like a sex thing? Is that why you're laughing?
Yes. It sounds like
That's why we're laughing.
But what would happen? Is that
It's a duck hooker, Pip.
It's a hooker, but a duck. No.
I didn't hear it until now.
I immediately understood what you did mean, but the other meaning
You just kept saying hooker duck.
Oh no! What most people think.
Don't worry, Chris will just make the gap when I was getting the DLC joke, like 20 seconds. I will look more stupid, so it'll be fine.
Oh. Can we move on?
This is like when you found out what Netflix and chill was.
Yeah, having used it wrong several times.
Just gonna go home to Netflix and chill on my own.
It must have
I don't think you
sounded
can
like
do that.
masturbation. I really do.
I think it probably did.
I think tonight I just want to hook a duck and chill.
Oh, God. We have the most unusable podcast titles sometimes. Justin writes, Dear Crutches and Calipers, I've always enjoyed non-standard health mechanics, or the framing of health mechanics in unique ways. For example, the Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway attempt to portray a more realistic, I use this term loosely, system in which you're exposed to enemy fire, the screen turns more and more red without any bullets actually hitting you. Instead of absorbing bullets, as in a typical shooter, this represents your character running out of luck, and inevitably ending up with a hole where a hole shouldn't be. Once behind cover, your luck regenerates. This is, of course, a regenerating health mechanic, but it's flavoured to match the setting in a way that seems more natural than shoving a superhuman with regenerative capabilities into the same situation. Do you have any other examples of unique takes on health mechanics?
It doesn't sound like that's what's happening. Could you not just pretend that it's a luck mechanic for everything else where you get shot at and it turns red?
I mean, I always like to pretend in Gears of War that there was just too much jam.
Yeah. Like, I don't,
Jam
is that a
fills.
thing that is explicitly said in the game?
Well, I suppose your
Or is
character's
it-
being physically hit by bullets. Which
There is...
But I mean, you don't
In
see
Brothers in
that
Arms
your
that
screen
there
just
is-
turns red.
I don't 100% know if it's exactly what it's talking about, but there is like a suppression mechanic, and when bullets go near you, it's like... And when bullets go near enemies, it suppresses them and they can't fire back. Okay. And so that's the same thing. My answer, and I apologize that it's not a PC game, is Horizon Zero Dawn, where you have a health bar and a medicine bar, and the medicine bar is filled by picking medicinal plants. There's no crafting for this part of it. You just literally pick the plant and it just fills that bar. And at any time you can press a button to refill your health bar from the medicine bar. And so at first I was like, isn't this just a health bar? But then the interesting thing is that your health bar never regenerates otherwise. Like, that's the only way that you heal yourself is just by using a medicine bar, and the only way you fill a medicine bar is by picking these plants. And I don't think you can even buy them anywhere. So you literally just have to kind of live off the land. Like, anytime, the way it ends up working is that anytime you're in a big fight and you lose a lot of health, your actual health reserve is pretty big if you keep healing from your medicine reserve. But at the end of it, now you've got no medicine left. And particularly if you upgrade that capacity, it can be like 3 whole bars of medicine. And the difference between having all that stocked and having none of that stocked is huge. And if you finish a fight with none of that stocked, you're just going to spend a long time just like roaming the land, picking plants, and just trying to stay out of fights. Yeah. And it gives this really nice like pacing balance to it, where you have this rhythm between anytime you have really intense action, the more intense the action is, the longer the period that you're just going to kind of roam the world and pick plants and just chill out for a while. And that's kind of what you want to do anyway after a really intense fight. So that works really well.
I thought of one actually. It's not, well, no, I think it counts. So I've been playing, Pillars of Eternity, finally, and I really like the way they do health in the battles. I've not found a way of doing actual health damage yet. I don't think it exists. I'm only like a little way in, but basically all damage is endurance. So it's more like, you know, it's wearing your kind of fatigue levels down. You know, it's wearing you down over time. So you're not actually kind of getting cut up like you do in a lot of these kind of, you know, in like Baldur's Gate, you're like actually getting cut up. I thought that was just a really nice system, and it also works like gameplay wise, because just for anyone who's not played it, it's kind of Western RPG a la Baldur's Gate, where you've got like a party of heroes. It's fantasy, and when you end the fight, your endurance automatically regenerates, but you have this second meter, which is your health, which doesn't regenerate. So that is the actual like cuts and stuff. And then your health bar is a lot bigger than your endurance bar, and then you only recover your health when you rest or like go back to a tavern. And it was just a really nice system, because you don't have to do that thing like you do in most of these sorts of games where you have like a priest and all they get to do is healing spells, because it's not during the fight you need the healing spells, it's after the fight. And I thought that was really nice actually, to give you this free regen, but then they've hidden it under endurance rather than health, which I think is a neat system.
I think it also helps from a role-playing point of view as well, because you can be on your last shred of health, but full of endurance, and that makes your experience of a dungeon really tense, because if you run out of health, you're dead. And so that's then, but you're also fully capable of fighting, as long as you don't fuck up.
Yeah,
which is a really
absolutely.
interesting dynamic to find yourself in. So yeah, that is a good example. That is a good system.
I had, I've got kind of half of one and then a complaint.
Sure.
So the half of one...
A grudge, Pip, a grudge.
I quite liked that... it's a self-imposed one, but when I was playing Oblivion, I did a lot of potion crafting, but I never learnt anything from it because I absolutely refused and would just craft potions out of whatever shit happened to be in my inventory, and, you know, would just end up absolutely overburdened with nonsense that would hurt me as much as it healed me. But I sort of had one of those, you know, decisions where this is how I'm going to play the game, which was essentially, well, those are the potions you've got, so you have to choose between, you know, whether you want this terrible effect for that healing, or do you want, you know, like, and so that was kind of an interesting, kind of entertaining thing, and I still didn't bother to learn which potions would be actually good for me. It was just a collection of, well, I've got these 3 things, I'm just going to combine them, it'll be fine, probably. So, you know, that was kind of fun, entertaining.
I like that way of playing. That sounds awesome.
And the complaint was just that I don't think anyone's really done anything interesting with things that the Animal Kingdom do with health regeneration that are interesting or different, or, you know, so starfish and their regenerative capabilities, and lizards, you know, and things that can like shed particular limbs or, you know, appendages just to get out of trouble. Like I think there's a lizard that, you know, if a predator tries to swoop down and pick it up, it will just shed the scales on its back and leave a kind of weird glistening skin exposed until it can grow those back. And so I think it would be cool to explore what, you know, those, if you have then used that up and become vulnerable in that particular way, what that might mean for how you play. Or
is it sea cucumbers who can just eject their innards? Like if they get attacked, they can just eject all of their internal organs at the enemy, and it blinds them briefly at great cost to the slug, but they can eventually regrow them. Like they can survive without them, and they can regrow them over time.
Well, I mean, to go back to fish,
it's a bit of a one-off trick.
Pufferfish can only like expand a certain number of times in their lifetime because of the immense like
pressure on
physical
their heart,
cost that it incurs. And so I think having that trade-off would be interesting in a more overt way. Because obviously games do things where, for example, I mean, in Thumper, you know, you're that bug that flies along, and if you fuck up once, then you lose your wing casings, and then if you fuck up a second time, you're dead. So, you know, there are those things, but it doesn't tie it specifically to a particular mode of attack and then leave you vulnerable in a specific way. It's just a generalities thing.
Incidentally, we learned that thing about pufferfish at the at Bristol Aquarium. So Tim, something you should add is if, you know, because they brought it up in the specific context of don't tap on a pufferfish.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Are you going to have, like, telling people off for tapping on the glass? Because, like...
Gosh.
Or using flash photography.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is getting really granular and really...
You should have a counter how many times your pufferfish expanded.
It's quite a good idea, though. No, but potentially...
Thanks for this. You're welcome to this intimidating pitch meeting.
I'm really sorry.
It's fine. No, I mean, the idea of, like, a special rule, like, with, like, pufferfish, when they get stressed, they do their expand. I mean, you kind of got to have that in there just for, like, it would be so cool to see. But the idea that I didn't actually know that they have only so many puffs in them. Yeah. That actually, like, could be a little counter. Or maybe not, actually, you have to count them yourself. And then eventually, if it puffs too many times, that's it, you know?
Yeah.
I want, like, you know that statistics page that quite a few games have these days?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I could do a lot of stuff with a statistics page.
Or like an infographic
like,
of how many
number of
pufferfish
puffs.
Oh, no.
Number of, like, pops.
I mean, just in general, like, tapping on the glass is not great for fish, right? There's usually discouraged.
Yeah, I mean...
that could be just a thing that, like, a staff job is to go around and check people aren't tapping on the glass too much. Or...
Yeah, no, this is definitely stuff that Verity can tell me about.
And it could just be generically, if they do that, it raises the stress level of the fish, and any fish who gets too much stress dies. And then the pufferfish thing, that's more like a subset of that same...
Yeah,
principle.
right,
You don't don't necessarily have that.
Like pufferfish have a set amount of, like, almost like stress lives.
Yeah, maybe them. Yeah, okay. We better stop talking about
Sorry,
this.
we're just backseat designing your game.
No, it's because it's upsetting Pip, so let's...
Sorry.
In fairness, they can massively inflate their body many more times than I can before I die.
It's a really good point, actually, yeah.
That must make pufferfish feel better.
Yeah.
You with your ability to walk around on land.
I do strut that a lot.
Yeah.
Like
There you
Darth
go.
Vader.
This feels like this feels like you're extending like a single kind of solitary olive branch to pufferfish, who otherwise lose out to you quite so badly.
Man, don't feel so bad. I can't expand my body massively without dying.
I bet there's a pufferfish out there just going, you patronising bastard.
And then puffing out of anger and dying.
Oh, no.
That's exactly what I wanted to prevent.
Josh writes, "Hello from Boston, CNC," and this is a very well written question and a big question. So something we might not fully. We wanted to read out, but we might not have all of the answers for on this pod because it's a really big subject. But I wanted to read it out anyway. So here we go. I appreciated your rather fair discussion on partisan politics in games and wanted to continue it. Speaking as a registered Republican, I don't see a lack of conservatism in games themselves. Sure, lowering taxes and economic responsibility aren't very interesting game mechanics, 4X games notwithstanding, but themes such as individualism and the dangers of government oversight are plentiful. Meanwhile, when it comes to the hot-button social issues, the right is inherently reactive and can be exclusive as a result, making these stances difficult to accommodate from business and artistic standpoints. What I do see, however, is an oversaturation of the left wing in games journalism, leading to noted defensiveness on the right. I understand that the humanities lean left, but it seems overwhelming in this field. For example, my Twitter feed full of games journalists was not a fun place to be on the American election night, and I didn't even vote for Trump. My question then is, how do we as a community breach this gap and encourage more conversations like the ones on this show? And how do I convince my conservative friends that the Liberals aren't coming to take their video games? Thanks for the great pods. Josh.
I don't think it's something that we can really answer in detail or in maybe a helpful way here, but to talk in sort of more general terms, I've found that pretty much anything when there are polarized opinions or when there's polemic involved or when there's, defensiveness or, mudslinging or a feeling of being outnumbered or something, is just to approach things with that open to actually just discuss or talk or listen. Listening is such a big part of this, and challenging things where it conflicts with things that you believe in or things that you think are right, but not doing so in a way that is, gonna just ruin any chance of a constructive dialogue.
I think the flip side of listening, and to continue that point, is reading. And something that I noticed is a very common theme when I was at a lot of very long email conversations with, conservative gamers, a couple of years ago, during the Gamergate era, and those who, the really crucial distinction, the thing to establish was that criticism is not censorship at all. Criticizing something for its portrayal or whatever or anything it does not prevent that kind of thing from existing. So on the point of how do I convince my conservative friends that Liberals aren't coming to take away their video games, the answer is that simply they're not, and that the notion that they are is a reactive paranoid fantasy. Like there is no groundwork for it. There is criticism, but criticism does not prevent people from making things. It is purely a way of expressing the way specific critic writing wishes things were different.
Yeah, and you don't want an environment where people are afraid to criticize something or that criticism is not allowed of something. Like it should always be
no one wants that, right?
A situation where anyone's allowed to say what they think about the thing.
Particularly if your conservatism is of the flavour that emphasizes individualism. Criticism, the ability to individually criticize things, is an expression of individualism. I don't know. That's probably the most I can say about that without turning into a rant. But I think accepting criticism as a valid response to something that doesn't prevent subsequent things like that from existing is necessary before any progress can be made, really.
I think the other things that I would add are just that reflection and empathy are super important as well. So reflection just being because, things like feeling that you have been got at or criticised personally isn't the same as it having actually happened. And sort of taking a moment to say, was that really what happened? Or, has it just touched a nerve and that's a thing that maybe needs a bit of unpacking and they could have said it nicer, but it wasn't ultimately a dig. And the other thing would just be empathy in the sense that, because people only have a certain amount of emotional bandwidth or bandwidth for time even, and so if it's one person, a games critic or a writer or something, who happens to be a bit more public than the people who are questioning them, it might be the first time that you specifically have formulated that question and put it forward, but it might be the 50th time they've had it that day and not in the nicest format. And that's where expecting other people to have time for you is a bit of a dicey proposition, I guess, and also where doing a bit of reading around things and not necessarily putting the pressure on other people to educate you is important as well, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The other part of this question about how games journalism skews left wing, I would reframe as the politically engaged aspect of games journalism skews left wing. I don't think it's necessarily reasonable to say that the entirety of the profession of writing about great video games has a political alignment. I would agree that the side of the number of those people who express their political opinion tend to be on the left.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think I think
probably a lot of silent journalists on Twitter.
And you could come up with any number of reasons why that might be.
But also Twitter is itself a small, a subset of a subset. And so people who maybe gravitate towards Twitter would be a different subset to people who gravitate to sort of vocal particular subreddits or particular forums or particular comments sections or even just sort of Facebook groups or people that you might find on your own Facebook page. They all have slightly different makeups and for particular reasons.
I think it's I can kind of see why it might be, because I think there is probably a fear among maybe more kind of conservative leaning people that, like, if they kind of talk about I don't know, capitalist kind of their capitalist ideologies, that that people might accuse them of being greedy, or, you know, like kind of oversimplify their viewpoint, and so I think people kind of probably with that viewpoint probably just don't talk about it, and then it's kind of easy to kind of go, oh no, but I believe in kind of, I think what's often kind of, publicly kind of everyone to kind of on, if you watch TV or whatever, and it's like, oh no, we need more higher taxes and all this sort of stuff, and better welfare system. And I think, people just feel probably more comfortable being pro that, publicly than anti that. So yeah, I think just because that's what you see doesn't necessarily mean that's what everybody is.
I would also say that Twitter is an atrocious place to try and have a nuanced discussion with anyone about anything, partly because it ends up performative and you end up with sort of people like egging other people on or, wanting to posture. And also just because you just cannot achieve any degree of subtlety or explanation in the character count. You just can't.
And I think maybe the flip side to what you just said, Tim, is that the issues, so the side of the political aisle that is likely to have a problem with games as they currently exist is the left. And it's because the games have always been very good at expressing individualist power fantasies, capitalist fantasies, anything like that. These, a free market is functionally a game, right? Like, these things fit very naturally into games. Games very naturally fit that mold. Ideas of a sort of non-competitive political structure are more alien to games, and likewise issues of diversity and so on that we spoke about last week. For that reason, the people that you will see more regularly standing up to say, my viewpoint is not adequately represented by games as they currently exist, are on the left, because games, I suspect, skew right. They tend to be militaristic fantasies starring an individual, right? Like, there's, and so, which is not to say that all conservatives are passive in that regard, but, even with the notion in mind that conservatives to be reactive, they don't necessarily have much to react to in games, because the political position that they're presented is not necessarily anathema to their beliefs. What is anathema is to the response to that by the people for whom it is anathema. And that's, I think, what maybe creates this kind of dynamic where people on the left react negatively to games that seem innocuous, and then that creates this backlash against the backlash. And anyone who's followed any kind of game with any kind of political context on Twitter knows that the backlash to the backlash to the backlash to the backlash to the backlash is the engine that powers the debate that never ends. And that's, I don't know, I suspect that's part of it. I think it's not necessarily that all games journalists are left-wing so much as, one, politically engaged journalists tend to be left-wing, and two, that is because the thing that is lacking in games is, well, traditionally an attention to left-leaning beliefs or liberal beliefs like diversity and non-competitive forms of play, basically. As I said at the beginning of this, we weren't going to go mega in depth on it, but it is a huge topic. It's something I'd like to return to, possibly after less whiskey. Our next question comes from Kero, who writes, Dear hidden container and suspiciously easy to use alien weapon. So much of the coverage around Mass Effect Andromeda has been negative, understandably. It's difficult to talk about the game without discussing the backlash. Discussing? Sure, Chris. That said, I feel that the game itself has been completely eclipsed. I fucking love it, especially the middle and late game. It's some of the most fun I've had in gaming for a long time. And about halfway through my second playthrough after what accidentally became a completionist run, I enjoy pootling around space with my space friends, my spaceship, finding more about space. Chris, I'm sorry, but you're wrong about Liam. He's lovely. So, questions. How are you finding Andromeda? And are there any games you really enjoy that got buried in backlash? Caro. 2 parts to this one. I would concede that I can see why you'd like Liam, who is just my least favourite person on the spaceboat.
I like Liam.
Tom just kind of from nowhere, he's been quiet.
And that's it from Tom.
That's all I got.
No Man's Sky, really like it. Always have done. Not bothered about the stuff that they've added since, apart from the things that have been to do with the photo mode and the, I think, changes to the generation algorithms that just sort of, it's kind of hard to sum up what they do, and I don't think they really sort of explained it in a way that I can easily recall, but I think the effect overall was to make the planets feel a bit more epic, which is so unscientific, but and so those were the elements that I liked, because I just like skipping from planet to planet and, you know, just seeing what I see, and I've liked that since the game launched. I mean, I think I've said before, I can see the reasons that people complained. I think that I've spoken before about things that I thought should have been handled better or communicated differently, and you know, I have spent hundreds of hours in that game and don't regret it at all because of what I got out of it, and I am really glad that they are continuing to add things and respond to what people seem to want to do with it. I mean, you know, on the back of having, I guess, had their shot of communicating a thing with the product as release, like in the time since, they, from an outsider perspective, seem to have gone, okay, well, what do you guys want? And we will take that into account and rejig and, you know, add like race course building and add base building and add all of these things that definitely weren't part of the original proposition and were specifically mentioned as things that weren't going to be added when I had done pre-release interviews and things. And I think that is to the game's credit, and maybe it's just becoming more a toolbox that people can dip into and take out the bits that they want to play with. And I think, to the audience's credit as well, the response to coverage has changed as well. So nowadays, when I write about something that they're doing, you know, a new update or something, the majority of the response is actually positive, or like, oh, you know, I'm glad that they're still working on the game, or that sounds cool, or this particular element is interesting to me. So I think that maybe the backlash is, I don't know, maybe it's because of where I write for, and that you know, because I don't check the subreddit or anything, so maybe it's a very different story for other outlets or on other platforms, but it's, yeah, like, it's a thing that I have enjoyed throughout its life cycle and continue to dip into.
I've really enjoyed watching No Man's Sky through your eyes, I think. Because the vitriol against that game is in excess of even the vitriol directed at Andromeda, and yet it becomes a lot simpler when you see someone just simply enjoying it on its own merits without all of that baggage.
Yeah, and I think I went into the game, you know, like, as me. I was always going to enjoy stuff that catered to that side of just, you know, to revisit the wonderful word pootling. You know, that's what I love doing in games above other things, and so hand me a space in which I can do that on a bunch of interesting, diverse planets with different color palettes, and I'm fine. But I do get that people who bought it for other reasons wouldn't necessarily be, and I totally get that. But yeah, that game I've flown my tiny pootling flag for since it launched. Yeah.
Lovely. I think we're still at the expressing our feelings towards Andromeda with sounds stage, so we'll stick with that, but we might return to that game. Ben writes, Dear Craft and Sandbar, over the Easter holiday I visited St Michael's Mount in Cornwall. It's a tidal island reachable via walkway during low tide, but requiring the use of a boat during high tide. This kind of landscape always makes me think of games like The Witcher 3, but I don't recall ever seeing tides represented in such a physical way in any game. Can you think of any examples of the tide being used for a gameplay effect in a game? What about other sea-related phenomena, such as natural erosion?
So I don't know about tide, but erosion is a heavy factor in Dust, the Ubisoft game, where you are kind of a god directing channels of water and lava and stuff to form an island and to help your tribe of people to safety. It's a really cool aesthetic, and the mechanics are really nice, and it feels really cool to interact with.
It has
really
tidal waves, doesn't it?
falls
It
down.
doesn't have tides, but it has tidal waves.
It has massive tsunami type things, and you can create a fucking jazz shield by playing the trumpet in the right way, or a didgeridoo. I think like one of your tribes people is like a didgeridoo guy, and if he plays the right kind of jazz, it creates a force field around him, and like a tidal wave can just crash all around him, and he'll be safe, and all his friends will be safe within this jazz shield. But
Which happens on St Michael's Mount.
It wasn't as great as it sounds because it was absolutely fucking vital that your people go exactly where you told them to, and they fucking did not. They would just get stuck on geometry, they would go in the wrong direction, and you had no control. It was just like, well, I told them to do what I needed them to do, they didn't fucking do it, so I lost the whole game, and it's all over.
It was quite a little game, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? It was quite a small scope project.
It's one of those games I wanted to celebrate more, but I was reviewing it and I had to just face up to the fact that this just doesn't fucking work. Like, it's really broken.
It's a shame.
I can't think of anything else. I mean, we could have an argument about Tides of Numenera because it's got the word tides.
Well, I mean, wasn't The Witness a game that has
Witness the Fitness?
That's not how John Blow says it.
It's how I say it. It's how he should say it.
No, the way he should say it is, come on, mothers, get up, get down with the witness.
I was mostly just mentioning erosion with regards to The Witness because that's the game itself, the way that the terrain is laid out, the way that the island is actually crafted takes into account particular phenomena or particular kinds of erosion, the way that valleys are formed, that kind of thing. And that to me is interesting. But it's not something that happens over the course of the game. It's a thing that, has already happened, and you are seeing the result of this sort of fictional millennia of previous existence and life cycles and things like that. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that, because it feels like the sort of thing that I might have played if
it's seaside related, yeah. I mean, there are plenty of games where like lowering or raising a water level.
I was just going to say, that's like a classic video game puzzle. And I'm sure there are some where that's themed as the tide.
Maybe, but it's usually like you turn a crank and the temple fills with water or something like that. Tides in Numenera doesn't count because there's 5 of them, which would be a bit like if there was like high tide, low tide, sad tide, prideful tide.
What are the tides in Numenera?
Indigo, silver, gold, blue, and
so it's
red.
Like the stupid realms things. Well, not stupid, because I'm actually really enjoying it, but like, in Warhammer where it's like, oh, do you want to go to metal or ghosts or shoes or, whatever.
Metal, ghost,
we need to do a podcast for everything I like that you don't understand.
Well, no, it's more just like, when you're reeling off, where should we go today? It's just like, well, we can go to beasts or metal. And I'm like, well,
yes, the realms. Okay, so yeah, it is a bit like that. So
sure.
The realms in the new Warhammer are obviously fire, life, death, shadow, light, metal, beasts. It's like the Crystal Maze. Just understand it as being
Metal.
like metal.
Is
realm
that
of
like
metal.
the element, or is it like the music?
Future.
I like to think of them all as a bit like the music, actually. Well, God, what am I
Jazz.
missing? Did I get to 8? I can't remember.
Water?
No. It's,
Ice?
So hang on. We got fire,
Heart?
beast.
Everything was peaceful till the Fire Nation attacked.
It was, yeah. So hang on, light, shadow. I'm going to get to 8. I'm going to figure this out. This is totally
Okay.
a diatribe from the Mutants podcast, which we're not even doing.
Fine.
Light, shadow, life, death, fire.
What's the opposite
Beast.
of fire?
There isn't an opposite of fire. There's not an opposite of beast either. What
Oh
would the opposite
no,
of beast
let's not
be?
get into
Fridge.
this.
Okay,
Two more.
okay.
Just don't distract. 2 more.
Heavens. And shit. What's the 8th realm?
Did you do metal? Is that still a thing?
Metal. I didn't do metal.
I remember
I've
metal.
done it. Thanks, Tim.
Well, I've already
You've
forgotten
saved
what
this
happened at the
bit.
beginning, so...
Okay.
Oh, I don't think
It's
I don't
fine.
think it's
It
possible to
doesn't
save
matter.
No,
it.
it's not like that. The Tides of Numenera are blue, red, indigo, silver, and gold, I believe.
But what does that even mean?
Blue is wisdom and the pursuit of knowledge. Red is passion.
Don't regret asking
Go-
that.
Like, do they ebb and flow? Is that
Yes,
what this
they do,
is?
yeah.
Right, okay.
They ebb and flow based on the actions
Can you
of
drown in any of them?
cast-offs. No, you can't. Nor can they
Can
ruin
any
your
of them make
sandcastle.
rock pools?
No.
Right.
Crabs can't live in the wake of the concept of passion.
They should.
And I don't think I would ever have said that.
Oh, poor crab.
That was so good.
The crab poets will have
So
words with you.
perfect. You said crab. You could have said so many different things that live in rock pools, but you said the one.
The one that really can live in the wake of passion. Crabs.
Oh. Grim.
Oh dear.
Anyway, I don't even remember what the question was. So
Tides
it's
in
fine.
games. I think we've adequately answered it and
I think
also
so.
answered what the 8 realms in Warhammer Age of
We
Sigmar are.
answered a lot
So
of questions that weren't answered.
Yes.
welcome to the podcast, Tim. This happens every week. So this brings us on to what we'll wrap up with, which is our grudges. We haven't had a good batch of grudges for a little while.
Good.
This is very exciting.
Good as in it, there's one. Rather
There's
than...
2.
Oh,
Bad.
So the first one actually comes
extra good.
from Ben, who was our questioner for the last question. He
Okay.
appended a grudge.
Good for Ben.
Good for Ben. Bad for the grudge. I guess. This is Ben's grudge. The situation regarding the DLC for Mass Effect 2 is absurd, to the point that I may never get to play Mass Effect 3. These DLC packs have remained at full price since launch and are not even included in the complete pack, scare quotes implied. The only way to purchase the story DLC legitimately on PC is through BioWare points, 2,480 of them to be precise, and that's not including the non-story content. To get this many points requires buying 2 codes for 1,600 points each for 1,300 points total for a total cost of £32, more than a budget gamer like myself would usually pay for a brand new title. Worse still, this would leave me with 720 points spare, where the combined cost of the story DLC just 80. Bullshit token less, I could instead spend £24 for the exact same content. I can't afford to spend this much on a game that old, and I'm not willing to consider piracy, but I also don't want to start Mass Effect 3 without fully experiencing the second game, thus I am stuck. Thanks for reading and keep up the excellent pod. PS, big thanks to Tom F. for his Game Maker tutorials. I've just started programming and they were a huge help.
Awesome.
You don't end a grudge with a big up.
PPS, will Chris ever return to No Trace for Dishonored 2? The answer is I'd like to, but I no longer work for anywhere that would do that. So if I do it, it'll be a Crate and Crowbar thing. I would like to do it. We'll see.
Yeah,
I'm a
that
big
was
Mass
a
Effect
good
fan,
grudge.
and I never played any of the DLC for any of them.
You should have done. They were good.
Yeah,
really
Keeping
object
Citadel's
to-
really good.
I do really object to the, like, it's a sensible thing in terms of monetization, but it really rubs me up the wrong way, possibly more than anything else, when people price things in such a way that you have to buy into their stupid proprietary currencies.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way that is designed to leave you with an uncomfortable amount of loose change that screws you over and locks you into the
It's
system.
really unnecessary.
I found
hate
some way back in the day of navigating BioWare points split between the Dragon Age and Mass Effect series, the fact that I could pay the exact amount for everything I wanted. But that took heavily investing in both games, both series in a publisher's server, which is actively playing into their hand. I agree, it's a totally shit system.
There is, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, but in one of them, I didn't know this at all when I played it, but afterwards I found out that if you had pre-ordered or if you had some kind of DLC, you just get a fucking Promethean on your team.
Prothean.
Like, a Prothean, yeah.
Yeah,
sorry.
in Mass Effect 3. Yeah, Javik.
That's a fucking, the precursor race that the whole
Jaffa
mystery is all
Jaffa
about.
cake.
You just have one of them on your team if you pay the right money.
His name technically is Javik, but now it's Jaffa Cake.
Sorry, I totally misheard you. And I'm really hungry. And I know that there's fondant fancies downstairs, which are essentially Jaffa cakes, but...
So,
you know,
Jaffa
different.
Cake is one of the highlights of Mass Effect 3. Genuinely, he's very funny.
If he's desperate to spend his remaining points, and that's the main problem, and he's never bought the comic book between 1 and 2 because he actually played 1, he could just buy the comic book thing that lets you choose your choices from 1 for 2. I mean, it's not like good value, but it might make him feel better about like getting rid of the points and getting something.
You could get
as a
some of
comic
the
book.
cosmetic packs. There's some good, I don't know, fucking hats. It's not a good deal. He's completely right.
Yeah, that's just
But
awful.
at the same time, I completely understand the impulse because I think not having played like Lara the Shadow Broker going into Mass Effect 3 is a big downside. Not having played a rival as well.
Well, for me, it was a big problem because I couldn't break up with Liara without buying a DLC. I dated Liara in Mass Effect 1. Mass Effect 2, I couldn't date anyone because I was already in a relationship with Liara, but you don't get a chance to continue that or end it until you
You
buy
can still
the
date someone else.
Shadowbreaker. You can, but you can't end that first relationship, and I felt it would be cheating if I didn't end my first relationship before dating someone else. So yeah, I had to eventually get the
you
DLC
paid
and then
Bio
go back
Wear points just to break up
Yeah.
with an alien.
Yeah.
Nice. I like your
Because
morality
games,
there. That's
yeah.
quite sweet.
At least you made the effort. You could have just been sent a text.
If that was a cheaper
done.
DLC, I'm not saying I wouldn't
But
afford
text Liara.
Anyway, Grudge approved.
Grudge approved is going in the book.
Yeah,
The
it's
second
well in the
Grudge
book.
comes from Mitchell, who writes, "Dear High King Wargrim Grudgebearer."
Excellent.
That's very
I'm
good. That's very well done.
Totally up for that.
If you want to wear High King Thorgrim
job
Grudgebearer
description.
is the dwarven king in traditional Warhammer fantasy who bears the Book of Grudges. So
I
this is
think you'll find that I researched this for the
wasn't-
post that I did on that internet.
I see. Okay. I wasn't just telling you, Pip. I was telling the listeners at home.
Okay.
And Tim.
And Tim.
I suspected it would be Warhammer though. I had a feeling, like
Oh.
like original fantasy Warhammer.
Mitchell writes, "Please accept my humble contribution to the Librarium Grudgeotica Pipipica."
I know who that is.
Nice.
pretty good.
I don't know what voice I'm going to do this one in.
No.
Imagine,
Sexy
if
voice.
you will. Sexy voice.
Yeah, do sexy voice again.
Imagine, if you will, that you are a man with a gun.
Look at that voice.
It's Liam Neeson.
Yeah, like what is
Shooting.
this?
That's also that sexy voice. Like, I approve. Liam Neeson
Okay.
is sexy voice.
Sure, fine.
Shooting at other men with guns. You hear guns fire to turn... Blah, blah, blah. You hear gunfire to one side and turn to face your attackers, only to be confronted by a wall of green treachery. In an instant it clicks. The plant you vaguely admired just moments ago is not a real physics object, but merely a collection of 2D leaf-shaped textures, and as such does not inhibit your AI enemy's line of sight. You have but a handful of completely helpless seconds before you are riddled with bullets and or lasers from your unseen attackers and die. This tale has plagued me across the realms, from Los Santos to City 17 to the Wild West. From battlefields to the Clancyverse, and even to Andromeda and beyond. I request that you take note of this bush-shaped betrayal.
Why have you
This
turned into
farcical
somebody who is asking someone to do something before they die? Why is that
This
your
grudge
sexy voice?
against greenery. Seriously, though, this really bugs me. Thanks for reading, everybody, Mitchell. I don't know why I ended up there. I did end up at Letters from the War. I will I did.
It's like,
Taken
tell
4 is
mother,
weird.
Margaret,
tell mother to...
we go over the... I think maybe that is my sexy voice, is in the frame of like, Oliver, it is great to hear from you. We go over the top tomorrow. All being well, Jerry will be kind, but if not, I love you. Goodbye.
Yeah, I think I can sympathise with that, with like something that, you know, looks like
Illusory
it should
bushes,
act in
yeah.
some way in like the game simulation, but you know, because of kind of slightly shoddy programming, it doesn't. You know, I can sympathise with that.
Well, didn't we have a grudge maybe a couple of weeks back with somebody who is upset by things that seem that aren't predictably physics objects, or that, you know, something that looks like it would be the kind of ephemeral thing that you could brush through turns out to be a solid wall. And so maybe this would be like, we could have a chapter on just objects that misbehave.
I think
The
you've
lies
got to
of
have
physics.
a vision mode. I think it's basically impossible to like reliably. I mean, it's possible to make everything a physics object because then you're simulating the universe. And if you're going to draw the line somewhere, it's never going to be 100% consistent unless you go for like a really abstract art style where everything red is movable and everything white isn't, or something like that. And so, like, you know, Deus Ex has this problem. All of the modern Deus Exes, there's boxes you can move and boxes you can't, and the distinction is very weird. And I just think it's like the thing that players want to know is just a really gamey thing, which is which things can I move and which things can't I? And so you have to give them a gamey way to find out information, which is like hit a button, see an overlay, and it shows you which things are interactable. We already do this for like loads of stuff, including what is interactable. You know, Dishonored has a vision mode that shows you what's interactable, and Deus Ex kind of does, but it's more of a special thing. And I think that's just a crutch that we just have to lean on.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think, like you say, it's a gamey thing that the player wants to know, so it's okay to show it in a gamey way.
Yeah,
it's like, as long as it's kind of consistent.
If you're going to be gamey, it's better to be clear about it. If you can find a way to be not gamey, then great, but no one has ever done that, so don't think you can.
Are you disputing the grudge, or are you...
I'm suggesting a way for developers to amend the grudge. I agree with the grudge, basically.
Pip, is the grudge accepted?
Well, I lost track of it at some point because I couldn't listen to your sexy voice until it turned into something that wasn't kind of whispering because my skin was crawling.
I forgot how much you hate whispering.
Yeah, like I had to just not listen, and I'm really sorry. So for me, it feels like, I'm so sorry, but was it that sometimes greenery gets in the way of you seeing what
It's more that sometimes greenery looks like it might protect you from enemies, but the enemies don't actually count it.
Ah, okay.
They just see you through it and they still shoot at you.
I think that is
like
a gaming like legibility thing, and that is a totally legit grudge that something hasn't been signposted in a way that is useful to you as a player.
Boom, it's in the book.
Horizon Zero Dawn is very good at this because the only thing that hides you is red tall grass. And the reason red tall grass hides you is you're tall and you have red hair.
It's smart. I like those sorts of solutions.
Yeah.
I think that's fun.
It's really clear. I literally never, ever thought that something would hide me and it didn't. I never thought something wouldn't hide me and it did.
Tom's in the Passion Pond at Red Tide with Horizon Zero Dawn.
And now he's got crabs. Robot crab. Let's end the podcast. It's time to go away. If you'd like to send us a grudge or a question for a future episode, you can do so by emailing us at questions@creightoncrowbar.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at Creighton Crowbar, and when the time is right, send us a question on there. Why not? You can also support our Patreon at patreon.com/Creighton Crowbar. Our listeners allow us to do obviously this podcast, but also the Miniatures podcast, which will be coming up again pretty soon, and some spin-offs that are in the works. If you would like to follow us as individuals, you can do so. I'm at C Thurston, that is CTHURSTEN. This week's guest, Tim Wicksteed, is
at Twice Circled, which is TWICECIRCLED. Or just search for my name, because you know what, I'm Googleable.
The eminently Googleable Tom Francis is
Pentadact, PENTADACT.
And Pip also is there.
Yes, but I have a newsletter now.
We should totally plug Pip's newsletter.
So I'm going to try and remember what that is. So it's called Nature Stories, and it's like a tiny letter thing. So I think if, as long as nothing disastrous has happened, I think it's tinyletter.com/nature stories.
What can people expect from Nature Stories?
Well, there's one that you can see on the sign-up page about magnolias and things, but ultimately it's just going to be an extension of the things that I put on Twitter and Instagram about flowers and mini beasts and birds and things like that, and just flesh out those thoughts and stories and learnings in a way that short form blogging does not allow. And in case you're worried, I will always flag up if there's spiders in there in the subject line. Always.
Wow.
And how can people find you on Twitter?
It's at Philippa Warr, which is PHILIPPAWARR, and there's a link to the newsletter in the pinned tweet on that.
Thanks for joining us, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.